Okay, let's go ahead and get started. So we've got a lot of stuff to talk about this evening. We are not really going to talk too much about news articles of the week, although I did have a couple that I wanted to point out that are kind of in the theme with what we are going to talk about today. But for those that are tuning in for the first time, welcome to Game Tech Reviews. This is the YouTube channel dedicated to kind of the PC DIY space. So we cover everything from building a PC if you're a new-time beginner, or if you're a veteran of building PCs over the course of several different hardware generations. You'll feel right at home on this channel because this is what we kind of do deep dives into, whether that be CPUs, GPUs, DDR memory, case selection, motherboard selection, all that kind of stuff. That's what we cover here. So if you're new to the channel and you like these sort of topics, get subscribed to the channel and try to catch the Thursday live streams that I do every week. So far, we have not missed a single episode. We are now 64 episodes in consecutively every single week, and I'm going to try to keep it that way. So if you're new, welcome. We are a small community growing, but we are continuing to go into technical depth. So meaning my channel is more about deep dive on technology as opposed to more like surface level content. So today we're going to talk about a few things. I have some articles, but we're not really going to talk too much about the articles themselves. I actually wanted to kind of point out some of the things that we're going to highlight this week. Hey, Matt, how's it going? So, Gigabyte's Aorus AI top, the future of x86. We're going to talk about Nvidia's Blackwell, because that was notably missing from Computex, but I wasn't really expecting to hear about it, so we are going to talk about it here. And then I want to do something more interesting. We're going to talk about AMD's hypothetical roadmap, because there was a video, I think it's on the Hardware Unboxed channel, or maybe it's on the Gamers Nexus channel. Basically, it's the two Steves. When they were in Taiwan, they did a collaboration video where they both talked about Gamers Nexus has been doing a Is Intel Screwed series with Gordon from PC World. So they did a similar video in the same vein, but this time around it was kind of for AMD. Like, is AMD's Radeon group actually screwed? That's kind of what the video was about. So that gave me the idea about talking about AMD's roadmap. So we're going to talk about AMD's roadmap. Hypothetical, of course, because I don't know their actual roadmap, but I do want to talk about some of the things that I think, because in that video they were basically saying, well, what does AMD need to do to increase their market share against Nvidia and stave off Intel in the GPU space? And one of the things that everybody always brings up is price, like, oh, they can lower the prices. Realistically, that's not going to solve the problem, which is the reason why they're not doing that. If that would solve the problem, they would have done it. But we are going to talk about that later in the stream. I think that's probably going to be the most interesting part of this live stream. But I do want to first talk about Gigabyte's Aorus AI top. So Gigabyte is coming out with a new brand. It is a new sub brand of the Aorus brand. So let me see if I can find the thing here real quick. Aorus AI top. Let's see. Yeah, this stuff. So here, wait, where's the? Oh. Okay, so Gigabyte last week at Computex, they debuted the AI top line. Now, I know everybody's probably sick and tired of hearing about AI, but they're basically coming out with a new... What the key takeaway from all of this is they are targeting... What I've realized from Computex, watching a lot of those videos from the press coverage that was there and reading some of the articles, a lot of these companies, and that includes Gigabyte and the others, who historically have marketed their PC products to the gaming crowd, there is a shift in the tone. There's a shift in the narrative now. Now they're starting to market directly to AI-based startup companies. At least that's who I think they're targeting. But they're also targeting like content creators to a lesser extent. But the thing is, now that everyone's realizing that what AI can actually do for these different industry verticals, they want in on being able to sell the hardware and market it to that use case. So the AI top brand is basically, what's funny is, I was going to say, as far as I'm concerned, ASRock won most innovative product of CES, a blower style consumer GPU that's an AMD graphics card that uses an Nvidia, the 12 volt power connector, the infamous 12 plus 4, the 12x or 12 volt 2x6, whatever. Like that thing, the thing that everybody hates on the 40 series cards that melts, the whole like fire hazard fiasco. Like they put one of those on an AMD card, then slapped a blower style cooler on it, and then called it a workstation product. Like, well played, ASRock. Well played. That is the most innovative product that I saw out of everything from Computex last week. As far as I'm concerned, they won most innovative product of the show. Like, just hands down. Like, who would have thought ASRock, of all the people, of all the different companies that had booths at Computex, ASRock would have the best in show with the Radeon RX 7900 WS. They call it the WS, the Workstation series. Now, moving on to Gigabyte, why is that a big deal? Man, blower style. You guys know me. I'm a big fan of the blower style GPU cooler. It's so good because you don't have to care about your case airflow. You can literally just throw the graphics card in the worst air-cooled case imaginable, and it will work. It'll just straight up work. So, and the thing is, you can put like 4 of these in one Threadripper machine, provided you have the PCIe slots with the correct spacing, and that's exactly what Gigabyte has done here. So with this AI top, Gigabyte, with their new Aorus AI top brand, they're introducing some new motherboards. In particular, they're introducing a new Threadripper motherboard that works with both the Threadripper and the Threadripper Pro series processors, and it's an 8 DIMM slot DDR5 RDIMM motherboard. So this thing is a beast, and you can see it has 4 full-length x16, electrically x16, not physically x16. It's obviously physical x16, but these are 16, 16, 16, 16. The 64 PCIe Gen 5 lanes. I think they're all Gen 5. I didn't look into that, but the point is, you got x16 on all these slots, so you can run 4 graphics cards in this motherboard at full 16 lane bandwidth per graphics card. So that is a beast. This is basically the most high-end motherboard that I've seen in the consumer market. Everything else that's this sort of level of high-end is actually server-grade hardware. So, and this is borderline server-grade, considering it has a Threadripper socket, which is the same socket as the Epic CPUs. So this is basically what they're trying to market to the AI crowd. So Gigabyte actually has a video on their Aorus YouTube channel showing who this is for, different builds that they suggest, the lowest end price for their suggested AI top PC is like $6,500, and that includes this motherboard, the 24-core Threadripper, so basically the Threadripper that I have, and then it also has 4 of these also very innovative blower style RTX 4070 Ti Super AI top 16 gig GPUs. So it takes 4 of these, it puts them in this Threadripper motherboard, and that's like, what, 64 gigs of VRAM? The guy was saying 64 gigs of VRAM in a pool to assign AI training and inferencing workloads. So that is how to do AI on a budget. But the pricing only goes up from there. So it starts at like 6.5 grand, and then you're going up to like, I think $36,000 was the top of the line, with 4 AMD Radeon Pro W7900 dual slot graphics cards. 4 of those are each 48 gigs of VRAM. So that's what, 192 gigs of VRAM. And I think the Threadripper board had like 2 terabytes of memory or some crazy amount. So yeah, so that's some serious hardware. So that is who they're marketing these products to. Now, at the end of the day, it's great that they're doing this. They want to get in on the AI craze. I don't blame them, but I'm very skeptical in terms of how many people are going to buy into this, because if you're a company that's serious about AI inferencing and also like training the model, because the training the model is actually the thing that's really hard. That's the thing that takes a lot of time. That's the thing that uses a lot of VRAM. Inferencing does too, but training is the one that has the very, very long amount of time to complete. So if someone's serious about that, I don't really know if they're going to be doing, like, they're going to be buying consumer hardware to do that. Unless it's like a really, like a, either a hobbyist or someone who's just starting out and they're probably trying to form like a consultancy firm. Maybe that's who they're marketing these products to. But to me, like, out of everything that I saw, these were the things that stood out to me. Like the 4070 AI top and ASRock's RX 7900WS with the Nvidia power connector on an AMD GPU. Like that, to me, that was cool. And then obviously this monster motherboard was really cool because I like super high-end motherboards. So anyway, that is what I wanted to talk about discussing like AI, because everybody was talking about AI. Everyone was kind of making fun of AI, but in all seriousness, it's here to stay. There's too much investment in this for it to quote unquote fail or go away. And there's just too many Fortune 500 companies that are way invested in this for it to go away. So it's not like crypto. That's the thing. Like crypto, depending on what your opinion was on crypto, you had the naysayers and you had the people that were all in on crypto. Then you had the people that were mining crypto, and then you had the people that were just buying and trading crypto like it was some kind of stock market thing. Like they were just doing like stock trading, but it was with crypto. You had them, but the vast majority of people kind of like stayed on the sidelines and never really got into it. AI, the difference between the whole AI thing versus the crypto thing, crypto to me, at least for the next 10 years, I'll say that crypto has a lot of work to do to get a lot of buy-in from large companies and organizations. Like a lot of companies support the idea of blockchain as a technology, but the technology still has to prove itself in terms of maturity and like how accessible it's going to be, because like if you live in a country that doesn't have the infrastructure to support the electrical grid to even do crypto mining and trading and all that stuff, then what's the point, right? And then if you live in a country that completely disregards it and doesn't give it any sort of value, they completely devalue it at a government level versus the fiat currency in that nation, then that also further like it makes crypto irrelevant in that region. So that's why I feel like crypto still has a long way to go. Meanwhile, AI, I feel like in terms of governments, they've already kind of bought into the idea. So there isn't really this hurdle to convince the general public to adopt AI, especially when I say general public, I'm not talking about like the random people in their homes. I'm talking about like companies, industries, government institutions, educational institutions. Like AI, I feel like has already gotten past that hurdle, where I feel like crypto never actually progressed beyond like step 0, if that makes sense. Now, there were some companies, there were some people that bought into it, but by and large, it was very niche and very rare. It didn't really like take off globally. So that's why, I mean, I'm not saying it's not going to happen, but it's a slower process. It's going to take longer to convince people compared to AI. So AI, there's just too many visual, finite examples of how AI can change certain industries and increase productivity, and not necessarily eliminate jobs, but enhance existing jobs. Although it is true that you could technically use AI to automate a lot of existing jobs. But I don't think it's going to pose a huge threat to a lot of people's jobs. Like, I can see it augmenting and enhancing jobs and in turn productivity per worker versus it having the opposite effect where it just eliminates jobs and creates a big problem economically. So that's what I would say on AI. That's kind of my view on it. If you have your own questions or you want to like bring something up in the chat, feel free to do so. That's kind of what we do on these streams. So now let's talk about... you know what? I put these in the wrong order. I think I want to talk about Nvidia's... Do we want to talk about Nvidia's Blackwell next, or should we talk about the future of x86? Let's talk about x86 because I put it in order. So we've covered this one. Now let's cover the future of x86. So a lot of stuff at CES, I feel like thinking back to CES, or not CES, Computex into next year, into the following year, into 2025, 2026, and beyond, I think it's safe to say that when everybody looks back at Computex 2024, the thing that they'll remember, anyone who attended the show in person or even watched any of the press conferences, I think the main thing, that the key takeaway was not AMD, ARM, and specifically Qualcomm and the Snapdragon X Elite. This was the defining thing. So, okay, people are going to say AI was the defining theme of Computex. And yeah, AI was pretty much talked about by everybody. But in the grand scheme of things, I feel like this Computex, because AI is going to be in the next Computex, and then one after that. AI is not going away. But Qualcomm and the Snapdragon X Elite going into Windows with Copilot Plus. I feel like this was the main... This is the thing that stood out to me. Now, this might just be my opinion. A lot of people might say, oh, AI is what stood out. I feel like AI is what stood out to people who... I'm not trying to sound like I'm insulting people when I say this, but I feel like AI was very surface level. So the people who don't think deeply about the technology and the implications of the future and how this can reshape the industry as we know it, AI wasn't really the thing. AI wasn't really the threat, I should say. It was actually Qualcomm with the Snapdragon X Elite. And I guess at a more higher level, it would be ARM and the big push that they're making into Windows, into the Windows operating system with their NPU, the whole like 45 tops number and all that magic that they were talking about at the show. This is the thing that I think is the defining inflection point in the industry. So there were two things. We'll just summarize Computex in two things. Two dominant themes of Computex 2024. Number one, AI is everywhere. Number two, ARM is coming to take over the PC market. Hence the marketing term PC reborn. The PC is reborn in Qualcomm's eyes with the Snapdragon X Elite. You can already pre-order the Microsoft Surface Edge Pros with the Snapdragon processors in them. They'll be available later this month. I think actually the 18th of June, they're gonna start shipping them. So if you pre-order one now, you'll get one, assuming you can still pre-order them, because I think they're sold out in a lot of places. So it's happening, guys. And the CEO, I think his name was Cristiano, or maybe it was the ARM CEO. I think it was the CEO of ARM. But basically, one of the CEOs, I can't remember which one, it was either ARM or Qualcomm. One of those guys, it was either the ARM CEO, I forget his name, or it was Cristiano. He's the CEO of, I think Cristiano's the CEO of Qualcomm, if I'm not mistaken. One of them, I forgot which one, said and I quote, "We will have 50% of the," and I'm paraphrasing here. I don't know, I forget the exact quote, but basically I'm paraphrasing. "We will have 50% of the Windows market share in 5 years." That's basically what he said. He went on the record and made this declaration. We will have 50% market share in 5 years for the Windows PC space. That is a massive, massive claim. That is a bold statement. You guys have no idea how bold of a statement that is to declare that you're going to take 50% Windows market share when you have less than 1% today, and you're going to claim in 5 years you're going to take half of the market. Now, this is such a massive, massive statement because when we think about x86 today, first of all, what is there? There's Intel and there's AMD. AMD came in with Ryzen like what, 6 years ago? About 6.5 years ago? Or was it 7 years ago now? I think 7 years ago. Yeah, 7 years ago, AMD came out with Ryzen. And they were basically coming back from like single digit percentage. And I think they're about like 30% now. So in 6 years, AMD did like 30% at best Windows market share. Like that's not 50%. And keep in mind, that's x86 versus x86. So meaning you don't have to worry about compatibility issues with instruction sets not working correctly or apps just straight up not working on your architecture because your CPU is different. Like that was the thing that AMD didn't have to deal with that at all. That is something that ARM may have to deal with quite a bit, and Qualcomm in the coming future. So 50% in 5 years, that is a very bold statement. That's an extremely bold statement. You guys have no idea. Like, if a CEO is so confident to say this, to go on record and say that, assuming that he's still the CEO 5 years from now, there are people that are going to hold him to that word. They're going to hold him to his word, and they're going to expect to see him pull that off. So if he can't pull that off in 5 years, if they don't get traction, man, this is a massive, massive undertaking. This is almost like a huge gamble, but it is a calculated gamble from the CEO of Qualcomm to go in to the PC market, in the laptop market specifically, and attempt to take over the market in almost like a hostile takeover. So like a lot of people that watch my channel are PC enthusiasts. So they often don't really think about what's outside of a high-end graphics card or a high-end CPU or like a high-end liquid cooler or something. Like they don't really, they can't, they're like tunnel visioned in on these like Halo products. They don't see the bigger picture. So they have no idea like the implications this could have on their hobby in the future. So this is why I'm bringing this up, because this is a huge deal. Like a lot of people who like watch YouTube videos or read review articles on PC hardware like graphics cards, CPUs, etc. You know, we've done a lot of talk about Zen 5 recently, and we're going to talk about them even more later on as we get closer to the launch. But like people who watch my content for that sort of, I guess, the meat of the content or the actual, like they want to see the stuff about the hardware that they're interested in. So they're not really interested in Qualcomm stuff. Just know that this could have either a very detrimental effect, or it could be a boon, or it could be like a reimagining of how the hobby plays out in the future because of how it changes the landscape in the grand scheme of things. So that's the thing that's interesting, because that architecture is huge in mobile, and there are a lot of naysayers now saying that, oh, well, it can't match x86 in performance. Now, the thing that I wanted to I guess the key takeaway here is ARM is moving into more than just laptops. ARM historically was in smartphones and tablets. Now it's moving into laptops. Soon it's going to move into desktop and servers and even things that a PC enthusiast doesn't even think that it would exist in. And when I say that, I'm talking about like network equipment, routers, switches. And I'm not talking about like some budget ONT in the house router for like Fios internet or something like that. No, I'm not talking about those type of routers. I'm talking about like big, full scale BGP route table, high end, super expensive Lamborghini class routers and switches for data centers and service providers who provide high speed interconnect for the internet. Basically, the people that build up the highway system for the internet, ARM is trying to get into that market. So just know that this is literally an all-out war. This is a war. This is the war of the worlds in the technology space, and the general consumer has no idea what is going on behind the scenes. I have seen the vision of the future. Okay, now I sound like a crazy person saying something weird like that, but just know that I'm aware of ARM-based devices that are going to power next generation telecommunications equipment that historically was always powered by Intel-based x86 processors. So when I say that this is a declaration of war by Qualcomm on Intel and AMD, this is basically ARM declaring war on x86 architecture. So this is the war of the architectures, the CPU architectures. This is going to play out for the next decade. And we don't know how it's going to end. But what I have seen is that I have seen a glimpse of ARM-based devices running in hardware that is traditionally only supposed to use x86, and it's running pretty good. So, and it's very energy efficient. And the thing that makes this even scarier, I make it sound like it's some kind of crazy scary thing. It's not really that scary. It's scary if you're an x86 guy. Let's put it that way. If you're Intel, you're probably terrified right now. Like, you're literally terrified. Like, AMD was always kind of there. It's like, AMD, we need them to stick around so we don't have a monopoly. So the government doesn't come and bust us up and break us into smaller companies, you know? Like, okay, so it's like, AMD, you guys can be there. Whatever. You're our rival. Blah, blah, blah. Whatever. Okay, so that's basically how Intel's always treated AMD. But here comes another, like, okay, guys, think of this like, how should I explain this to people who watch like Dragon Ball Z or some like anime shonen series or whatever? This is like, it's like all of a sudden you had like, imagine you have Vegeta and Goku. Vegeta and Goku are fighting. They're like having a one-on-one fight. That's basically AMD and Intel having the dumb little rivalry fight. You know, all of a sudden like Beerus or Weiss or Kid Buu or Majin Buu, or some bigger fish shows up, and it's like, oh, now what do we do? Like, we probably shouldn't fight each other anymore, right? like this is basically what's happening, guys. like the bigger fish just arrived. $20 just sub to the channel right on cue, because this is big money. Like, this is big money. ARM is making a huge push in this market, and it's starting with Qualcomm. And it's not, here's the thing, guys, just because everyone's like, oh, he's saying Qualcomm is gonna like beat up Intel and AMD and take over the PC market. That's not what I'm saying. That's one outcome, but that's not the only outcome. And the other thing is, keep in mind, think of the bigger picture. Don't think, oh, Qualcomm versus Intel and AMD. Think of it like ARM versus x86. So, because it doesn't stop with Qualcomm. Qualcomm's not the only player who's making an ARM-based CPU that's going to work with Windows. You know who also is going to make an ARM-based CPU that is even more terrifying to Intel? Let's see if people in the chat. We got 7 concurrent viewers. What's a company that is rumored to release an ARM-based CPU next year? Okay. Someone's paying attention. Mets paying attention. Nvidia is the answer. The answer is Nvidia. And Nvidia has been rumored to be making an ARM CPU. And they want to couple that with technically Nvidia already has an ARM-based CPU with what is it? Grace. Grace is their CPU that goes along like the Hopper and the Grace. Grace Hopper. Grace is their ARM-based CPU. Hopper is their big GPU, their AI accelerator GPU. So those two things together is the Grace Hopper in the data center. So the correct answer is Nvidia. But yeah, MediaTek, somebody else. It's not just going to be Qualcomm and Nvidia. There's going to be other players. You can imagine right now. I want to also point this out. There are a lot of Chinese companies that are state funded and funded by like Tencent and Alibaba and a lot of those big tech giants in China. Those guys are funding homegrown ARM-based CPU designs as we speak. So think bigger picture. We've got Nvidia like coming down with their CPU. Remember what I told you guys? Nvidia has ascended to godhood in terms of the tech world. Like Nvidia and Apple exist in this, and I guess Microsoft to a lesser degree, they exist in this alternate reality. Like they're basically in the god level, like they're tier 0, right? Like no one, Nvidia, AMD can't really touch Nvidia in the GPU space anymore. Like Nvidia is basically god tier and AMD is still immortal in the GPU market. So like they aren't even on the same playing field, you know what I'm saying? So like when I watch Steve do the little video about is AMD Radeon actually screwed? I mean, they've already been screwed. The reality, here's the correct answer. Radeon has already been screwed like for more than a decade, and there isn't really a way for them to come back unless there's like a full system reset or unless Nvidia is declared a monopoly, which isn't really going to happen, and they get forced to be broken up into like different smaller companies. Like that's really the only outcome that I can see happening, where AMD can actually get to like 50-50 market share with Nvidia. So I don't actually see that happening anytime soon because Nvidia is kind of a different entity at this point. Like they're basically a deity and AMD is like a mortal human. So it's like a human versus a god. Like who's going to win? You know, like you can't really compare the two anymore. Like look at Nvidia's market capitalization, look at AMD's market capitalization, and there you go. Like it's so easy to see it if you look at it from a numbers standpoint. Like I always think of like Dragon Ball Z power levels. Like if I have my little scouter, like Nvidia's power level is so much higher than AMD's power level at this point that they can't. It's not even fair. Like they're not gonna fight each other. They don't fight each other because there's no reason to. Like it's like two different weight classes in MMA. You know what I'm saying? Like it's not gonna happen. So. Hey VRM Moth. Intel Arc is playing catch up to AMD at this point. Yeah, I mean that's basically what it is. It's like basically AMD and Intel are the ones that are basically going to fight it out in the GPU market. That's what's going to happen realistically. So forget about Nvidia versus AMD. I mean, there's no reason to really do the comparison. I guess you can still do the comparison in the mid range, but it's like, does anyone actually care anymore? So, but this thing, I just want to close off on this subject about ARM versus x86. The fact of the matter is that Intel and AMD and possibly x86 at large, the days of that architecture might be numbered. From this point forward, that might become a sinking ship. Meaning, think of it like x86 is the Titanic, and they hit the iceberg last week. And now it's just a matter of how long will they stay afloat until they actually sink. Like, meaning x86. I'm not talking about Intel and AMD sinking and going under. I'm talking about x86 as a architecture for CPUs and the instruction sets that accompany that. That will probably sink and eventually go away. Because if Qualcomm, Nvidia, MediaTek, Chinese startup companies, all these companies that make network equipment, if they're just doing their own ARM designs, Amazon wants their own ARM CPU. I mean, Apple's doing their own thing with the M series. Like, you see what I'm saying? Like, at a certain point, the ARM standard is going to win out because there's just too much forward momentum. I see it like a fighting game. Like, I see it like a Street Fighter or a Tekken match, where the player using the ARM character versus the player, basically Intel with their x86, there's too much forward momentum on the ARM side that the x86 guy is like only playing defensively now. And he can't actually win because he's only blocking and tackling. He's not able to do like a 10-hit combo because he's like backed up against the wall, and it's like very hard for him to come back. You see what I'm saying? Like, there's a lot of ways to express this point. But what I'm saying is, this war is going to continue to play out over the next several years, and I don't know what the future holds for x86. But anybody who keeps talking about Intel versus AMD or Intel Core Ultra versus Ryzen, that's very, very short-sighted, and they're not actually seeing the big picture. So that's very simple-minded, tunnel vision, you know, like, that's not very big brain thinking is what I'm saying in terms of the grand scheme of things. But anyway, so that's the future of x86. It is potentially a very bleak future. That architecture could have its days numbered. Is it going to go away overnight? No. It's going to be a very, very slow death. Like all things with technology, it will have a long lifespan. I mean, it's already had a very long lifespan. Unless it can somehow change in certain fundamental ways, which I don't know. Maybe it can. We don't know what's going to happen. What's interesting is with all these node shrinks moving to the angstrom scale from the nanometer scale, we don't know how ARM and x86 will stack up 10 years from now. You know, in terms of energy efficiency or perf per watt, core density, how applications actually take advantage of multiple cores. All those sort of questions, they still remain to be answered. So that's why x86, as much as I like x86, I see the writing on the wall, and who knows, 10 years from now, anyone who's a PC enthusiast, maybe we're going to have ARM CPUs. Maybe at some point we're going to have Nvidia or Qualcomm-based CPUs and Nvidia or AMD GPUs, or maybe it'll be Intel GPUs. You know, like, who knows, maybe a decade from now, a gaming PC will have a Snapdragon-based, like 32-core, whatever, 24-core, 28-core, who knows, and maybe it could be like 30-plus cores. Maybe a gaming PC a decade from now can consist of a 32-core Qualcomm, whatever, Snapdragon 9000, whatever, with a Radeon GPU, or assuming they're still around, or it's just going to be GeForce. If the GeForce brand is even still around a decade from now, unless it gets rebranded to something else. Or maybe it'll be an Intel GPU. You know what? Like, that's the thing. Someday in the future, you'll have Qualcomm CPU, Intel GPU. And some alternates could be like Nvidia CPU, AMD GPU, or AMD CPU, Nvidia GPU. I think Ryzen plus GeForce will still be around 10 years from now. Yeah, unless they rename those names. But I think AMD was still going to be doing CPUs. Because here's the thing, guys. Keep in mind, AMD, back when AMD was building Ryzen, like when they were, you know, off in the Grey Haven somewhere, with the elves of Lord of the Rings training or whatever, and Jim Keller was there, and Gandalf was telling him, you know, like, do this and do that, and Jim Keller was like, I know what I'm doing, I don't need you to tell me, old man. And he was like, we're gonna make this star topology, we're gonna have SMT, it's gonna be great. And the elves were like, here's our technology, okay, cool, I'm gonna put that in. And then bam, you got Ryzen 1800X. You know, like, that was the first Ryzen. back when they were making that, they were also considering doing an ARM-based design. Like when Jim Keller was helping develop Ryzen, the Zen architecture, they were also thinking of doing an ARM-based CPU. This is a well-known thing. So who knows? Maybe if ARM wins, that's the thing with AMD. AMD, they can pivot if they have to. In fact, I would not be surprised if right now AMD has an internal engineering team that's evaluating an ARM-based CPU design for a future Ryzen or Epic product line. I would not be surprised at all if AMD is working on ARMs-based CPUs while they're still developing x86-based CPUs. And on the flip side of that, I also would not be surprised, as much as Pat Gelsinger says that Intel is all in on x86, I would not be surprised if Intel has an internal secret team, like the most top-level security clearance secret team, the most secret team. It's super secret. Like, this is so secret team. Like, you can't talk about this even if you're an Intel employee. Like, they probably have a team that is so secret that that team's tasked with developing a potential ARM-based Intel CPU. I would not be surprised. So keep in mind, AMD and Intel, they're not going to go away, but the architecture, the x86 architecture, should potentially go away if the market demands it, if that's how it's going to be. So those are my thoughts on the future of x86. Let me know in the comments here if you guys agree or disagree or what you think is going to happen. Like, can anybody say with high confidence what the desktop PC will be like a decade from now? Could anybody 10 years ago predict what we would have today? Like 10 years ago, did you think that 96 core, 144 cores would be possible in a single socket CPU for server? Because on desktop today with Threadripper, we have 96 cores on a one single socket. And then meanwhile in server, you have like insanely dense stuff. You got Bergamo Epic with 128 Zen 4C. You got Turin coming with Zen 5. You have Intel with their, what was it called? Sierra Rapids, I think. Sierra Forest, Sierra Rapids. I think Sierra Forest with 144 E cores. Like, there's a lot of changes. I don't think anybody 10 years ago, I don't think anyone 10 years ago would be able to say, oh, in 10 years from now, there's going to be a CPU with big cores and little cores. I don't think anybody could have predicted that. Unless you worked at Intel and you were in CPU design. Or, and I don't think anybody 10 years ago could have even predicted that AMD would have Ryzen, which was more energy efficient than Intel CPUs and better performing than Intel CPUs in gaming with the X3D. Like, I don't think anybody a decade ago would have even predicted anything like that. So, nobody knows what it's going to be like a decade from now. Like, we could be looking at like 32 core could be like the Ryzen 5, 64 core Ryzen 7, 96 core, 100, whatever is the Ryzen, whatever it ends up being, right? Like, core densities could scale so high, power consumption could stay the same or lower or slightly higher, I don't know. Like, advances in cooling technology, IHS designs could change, socket designs. Maybe everyone's going to make a really fat socket like Epic, because Epic and Threadripper, they don't overheat. Like, you can literally put a air cooler Noctua on a Threadripper 350 watt TDP CPU, and that thing runs cooler than a Ryzen or an Intel CPU. Like, seriously, no joke. I know, I've got one. So, who knows what can happen? For all we know, we can move from one silicon in 10 years to a new material. Yeah, exactly, right? Like, yeah, that's a good point. We haven't even talked about material science and how material science innovations and discoveries in material science could literally change the entire narrative completely. So So lots of interesting stuff could happen from between now and in a decade from now. All right. So that was the future of x86. So that's number 2 on the list. So we did Aorus AI top. So I talked about AI. We just talked about CPUs. Now we're going to talk about Nvidia's Blackwell. So this is something that was definitely missing from Computex. Although I don't think anyone was truly expecting any product announcement from Nvidia for consumer GPUs. Like I already knew they weren't going to do that. I did not expect them to do that. It was kind of a Hail Mary, like, oh, maybe they're going to talk about it, you know, like, who knows? Maybe they'll do some teaser at the very end. But nope, 2 hours, and all they did was talk about AI the whole time, essentially. And they showed off, like, their AI accelerator hardware in like a server tray. So that's basically all they did. So let's talk about Blackwell. Let's talk about what we know in terms of the leaks. So let's bring up the article here. So there's this article from Video Cards, GeForce RTX 50 Blackwell GPU series leaked. So what we know, and I said this last time, I told you guys, out of all the leaks that I've seen, the only one that looks legitimate is that I can pretty much say, the one that I would say sounds like a 5090 is the 480-bit. So this one right here. So Nvidia GeForce RTX 5090 rumored to feature 448-bit memory bus. This sounds real. This actually sounds like it's the real deal. 512 sounds like that's the 5090 Ti. So that's gonna be like a Blackwell 7000 or whatever in the data center, or the workstation card. So I don't think we're going to be getting a 512-bit from Nvidia for consumer GPU. I think we're going to get most likely a 448 at best as a 5090 for like $2,000. I think that's what's going to happen. Because the 512-bit is the full enabled die. That's not what they're going to sell at launch. I can pretty much guarantee you that. So 512-bit is the Ti. 448 is the non-Ti. You think we're going to get a 384? The 384 could be a 5080 or a 5080 Ti. If they do that. No, I think we know that the 512 is the full die. Isn't that what this says? So it says right here, the GB208 is still expected. Here, let me zoom in, make this larger. It's not really doing it. Okay. The GB202 is expected to feature 12 GPCs and 8 TPC per GPC, resulting in a total SM count of 192, assuming 2 per TPC. This, however, does not mean NVIDIA will use such a configuration for the actual product. And I agree with that statement. NVIDIA will typically not do the full die, especially at release, because of yields. It comes down to yields. And this article even says that in the next sentence. The retail SKU will likely feature a cut-down configuration to maintain good yields. We also know that NVIDIA is planning to use a 448-bit memory bus, although the GPU supposedly offers 512. So 512 is probably the Ti, which is basically the workstation card. So that means, to me, it's looking more and more like a 448-bit bus is probably going to be the real 5090. Because if they do 384, they're not going to get the sort of performance uplift that you would typically expect versus the 4090. So they kind of need to go wider on the memory interface this time around. How are they getting 33% CUDA core increase with a 6% node density increase? Well, isn't this a node shrink? What is the TSMC node that this is being built on? Isn't this the 3 nanometer Or 2 nanometer? What is this? I forget what the node was. Do we know? It's 4 nanometer? Yeah, so it's the 4 nanometer node. Isn't the one that... Is it the same node or is it a different node? No, it's a new node. They're going to a new node because AMD's not going to a new node for the GPU. That's why. It's because of the node shrink. They're doing 448. They can do 448 because of the node shrink, which is a 6% node density. So are you saying it's going to have less... So... Hold on. 192... 8 times 12 is 192. That, I mean, to me, the math checks out, at least when comparing the tie with the other tie. You think all the numbers are fake? I don't really think they're fake. I think, okay, here's what I think on these. I think they have the general SM counts correct. Like, meaning, Kopite, keep in mind, this guy... He doesn't know what the actual retail products will be. All he knows is the node. He knows the die. He knows the die generation. So like GB102, GB202, GB203, 205, 206, 207. He knows that. He doesn't know like how they're gonna cut that up. You know, okay, put it this way. He knows like the actual thing. So just to use this as an example, okay, no, that's not a good example. That's a Samsung SSD. Where's hold up. Here's a CPU. We'll use the CPU as an example. He knows the die. Okay, he knows the die size. But he doesn't know like how they're gonna chop it up. Meaning he doesn't know how they're going to market segment. Like, are they going to chop 20%? Are they going to chop 15%? Are they going to chop 30% off? And call it a 50-90, call it a 50-80, whatever? Like, he doesn't know that. I can tell you, this guy, this Kopite Kimi guy, he doesn't know how Nvidia is going to segment the part. But he knows what the die size, he knows, like, the memory interface size, the theoreticals. He knows theoreticals, but he doesn't know... like what they plan to actually bring to market. That is the difference. Blackwell is a dual GPU die with HBM VRAM, which is not going to be used for which can't even be known from the data center die. What? So, wait, what? Blackwell's not coming to consumer... Wait, what? Where'd you hear that? Are you saying Blackwell's not even going to come to the consumer market? Like, are they skipping Blackwell? Is Blackwell like a Volta? Are they pulling a Volta on us? What does that even mean? Like, to me, what's the... No, I think GB100 series. GB100 series is data center. GB200 series is consumer. Hey, Kelly. You're saying that they can't know the consumer GPU die from the data center die. Wait, so this is the data center die? I thought the data center die was the 512. No, see, okay, 512-bit. 512-bit GDDR7, 192 SM. That is the data center die. That's not the consumer die. He never said this is going to be the consumer product. I think the cut down is the consumer product. I think the 448 is the consumer product. Data center is not a 512-bit bus. What's the data center bus then? Oh, that's the HBM one. That's like 2000 something. 2048. Like a Cyberpunk 2033. So at this point, does anybody actually have any idea what the Blackwell consumer die even is? It sounds like You're making it sound like none of this stuff even is accurate right now. You mean that the Nvidia workstation die is the full GB200? I thought it was GB100. Okay, here's my question. If they're talking about GB200, where's GB100? GB200 is the second edition. It's the second generation within that family. So where's the GB100? The data center bus is 8,000. Yeah, that's the HBM. Yeah, so the data center one is the GB100. The GB100 is probably the 8192-bit bus. So what I'm saying is this. Yeah. So, okay, so the data center one has nothing to do with this. This is none of this stuff that's in here is a data center. This is the consumer, because the data center one is GB100. This one is GB202. This is second generation, which means this is the consumer. This is the discrete, which is like non-soldered or non-socketed. This is, like the PGA, whatever they call it. Like, this is the one that goes in the GPU boards. So I'm gonna tell you guys, I'm pretty sure that what is shown here is at a high level is accurate. I'm pretty sure this dude has ties to like TSMC. He doesn't have ties to Nvidia, but I think he has contacts within TSMC. So he at least knows like the orders for the wafers and like what the wafers are actually going to put, like what they're actually putting on the wafers. When he said that the 4080 Super was going to be the cut down at AD102. Did he say that? The cut down 102 is the 4080. The full enabled 4080 Ti is the 4080 Super. So that's the reason why I call it the 4080 Ti. Internally, I refer to 4080 Super as 4080 Ti because it is the 4080 Ti. Like 3080 Ti, 4080 Ti. That's why I made that video, 3080 Ti versus 4080 Ti, because it's a proper comparison. They have the exact same amount of cores. Like, they have the same SM count. Like, what are you going to do? It's like 10,204 or something like that. So anyway, Blackwell, I'm pretty sure out of all the leaks, the Blackwell is going to have some cut down variant. It's not going to be 512. All we know is that the full die for the consumer die is not, or let me rephrase that. The market product that you'll be able to buy at retail is not going to be 512. That's what I'm saying. It's not going to be 512. That much we know. And this Kopite dude is saying that it's going to be 448. And when you think about it, that to me, that sounds feasible, because especially when you consider like how is Nvidia going to achieve the performance uplift that they need to convince people to spend $2,000 again. You know what I'm saying? Like, how are you going to convince somebody who has a 3090 Ti to go to a 5090? You have to show the value. You have to show the SM increase. You have to show the bus width increase. You got to show all the numbers, because how are you going to get your performance uplift? They said something like 448. That's what I'm saying. Like 448 to me sounds the most real. So I think this article from May 30th, I think this one actually seems like it's the most accurate. 14 8 gigabit, which are 2 gig GDDR7 modules. That looks real. That means 28 gigs of memory, 28 gigabit per second speed, 1.5 terabit per second or terabyte per second maximum memory bandwidth. So to me, these look like the rumored specs of 5090. Now, Met's saying that they probably are going to cut it up even more. Yeah, they can cut it up even more if they want to do like a 50 or a 5080 on a 202. If they want to do that, then go ahead and do that. 5080 Here, okay, here, let's declare it, guys. Let's declare it. Here. Let's make the declaration. Here we go. RTX 5090. 28 GB. 28 GB VRAM. 448-bit. There we go. Okay, next one. RTX 5080. You guys have to help me with the math on the RAM. It's going to be a 384-bit GB 202. GB 202. GB 202. Check it out. That makes sense. That's doable. Okay, so hold on. Let me do some math here. 448 divided by this. 16. Oh, wait, hold on. That to that. That times 28 times 384 divided by this. Okay, this will be a 24 gigabyte card. There we go. There you go. There's your magical 384-bit. It's going to be a 5080. Oh, and guess what? This is going to launch first. Oh, man, the 384 is coming first. It's coming first. It's going to be like Ampere 30 series all over again. I can see it now. 3080 morphs into 5080 and it launches first. Oh, look, it's the affordable one. Meanwhile, the true big boy, the 8K gaming, is the successor to the 3090, is the 5090, 448-bit. There you go. There it is. That makes sense. Does this not make sense? Does that not make sense? Do we need to segment this even further? Because we already know, like, okay, if 512... Okay, this is what I think is going to happen, guys. If they're going to do, okay, GB203, RTX, 5080 fake one, or something. Like, that one is going to be the 256. Do you think they're going to do that again? You know how they had the fake 4080? They're going to have to rebrand it. They're going to have to call it the 5070 Ti because everybody complained. So they're going to have to do this. What if they do that? There you go. No one thought of this. No one thought of that. Everyone's like, oh, the 5080 has to be 256-bit bus. Nobody said the 5080 has to be 256-bit bus. If you're looking at 4080 and you're thinking that the 5080 has to be a 256-bit bus, you're not thinking about it correctly. What's the bus on a 3080 Ti? What's the bus on a 3080 Ti? See? So, like, okay, but see, guys, again, how is Nvidia going to get the performance uplifts if they're doing the 384 over and over and over again? You see what I'm saying? Like, here's the thing. You guys were telling me that back when we were trying to estimate the performance uplift of a 5090 versus a 4080, everyone's like, oh, it's going to be like 35% to 40%. Okay, yeah, if they do 384-bit bus, that's the number. That's the number. But if you do 448, you're going to get the higher number. You're going to get the higher uplift. Memory bandwidth isn't the only answer for performance. It is when you're at 4K. It is when you're at 4K. And guess what? Nvidia's targeting 4K when they make these GPUs. They're not targeting 1440p. They're not targeting a puny resolution for these type of GPUs. Seriously. All their testing is done for 4K when they make these big GPUs. You don't build a 448-bit card for 1440p. You know, like, that's kindergartner resolution. Like, no. The 4090 doesn't even, like, use its full power at that resolution. Northridge fix still getting 40... Yeah, I know. Yeah, it's still happening. So, but see, I'm really trying to figure out... I really want to pin down where these products are going to land so I can accurately estimate the performance uplifts. Do you think Cyberpunk path tracing is going to defeat a 5090 with a 448-bit bus plus GDDR7? You think that's not good enough for the Cyberpunk path tracing? You know, I don't even think Nvidia really cares about that, though, at this point. So, wait, hold on. So you're telling me that this spec with GDDR7, because this was also GDDR7, you're telling me that this spec cannot do path tracing at 60 frames per second at 1440p in Cyberpunk? Because remember, the target's 60 frames per second when they're coming up with these numbers, these metrics. So this can't do 60 FPS at 1440p in Cyberpunk with path tracing? What does the 4090 do at 1440 with path tracing? Because remember, the target is 60 FPS. If it's hitting 60 FPS, they check it off. It's like, okay, we passed. It's done. Anyone who's thinking like, oh, it needs to be 144 or 240, sorry, that's not how they do it. It gets around 35 to 40. Okay, so if the 4090 is getting 35 to 40, you really think this can't do 60 FPS at that resolution? Do you see now why I'm saying that it needs to be a 448-bit bus? Do you see why this makes more sense than 384? It'll reach 60 FPS. And again, we're not taking into account the changes in how the memory bandwidth. But yeah, like that sort of resolution, I don't know. Like that resolution to me doesn't fit this kind of bus width. Like I feel like this is definitely 4K. But yeah, this is what I think is gonna happen. Like I don't know if they're gonna name these products this way, but they could. Because you guys need to remember, the RTX 3090 and the RTX 3080 and the 3080 Ti and the 3090 Ti, all four of those GPUs were, in fact, now let me bring it up. Hold on. Let's go to the database. RTX 3080. Check it out. This one is a 320-bit. RTX 3080. Oh, look. GA102. Oh, look. Nvidia used the big die on an 80 non-TI. This proves my point. This proves that Nvidia can do another Ampere in terms of their product naming. They can call a 300... They could even cut it down further, guys. They could do a 320-bit 5080 if they wanted. Or they could just do 384 and call it a 5080 and launch it as the first part. And it'll beat a 4090. Rest assured, Nvidia will make it such that the reality is the 5080 will defeat the 4090 in everything. In rasterization, in power efficiency, in ray tracing performance. It will beat it at everything. They will make it happen. Just like they've always done in the past. Just like how they made a GTX 1070 defeat a 980 Ti. They will do this again. Rest assured. You think the 5080 will lose to the 4090? Well, we'll see about that. We'll see about that because I think the 5080 will defeat the 4090. The 5080 will be a 384-bit product. It's either going to be 320 or 384. And that will be a 5080 product. So, we're not going to look at the 1080 Ti and the 2080. You know why we're not going to look at them? Because the 1080 Ti doesn't have compute. And Nvidia, starting with the 20 series and definitely with the 30 series, Nvidia started putting more and more compute heavy performance capabilities in their consumer GPUs. They basically did the complete opposite of what AMD did. Basically, AMD and Nvidia, they were like, okay, AMD had compute throughout GCN, then they took it out, so their like FP performance went down. Whereas Nvidia was always like low on compute up till through 10 series, then 20 series they went up and they started going with compute in the 20 series and the 30 series. So this is why you cannot look at the 1080, you cannot look at Pascal and 20 series and use that as a way to predict the future product. You have to look at the more recent compute heavy parts. So the better comparison is to look at the 30 series, because the 30 series is more indicative of what they'll most likely do. And the reason why I'm saying this is because when I see all this nonsense right here, I'm like, okay, if it theoretically can go to 512, that means they're probably going to do some sort of market segmentation where they take that big die and they chop it up like they did with Ampere, and they start segmenting the big one. Because from Nvidia's standpoint, if they're going to charge $2,000 for the 5090, there's enough profit margin in these chips so they can chop them up and get enough parts with that big die. And they're just going to like sell the other ones at like, 600 or lower for the smaller dies. So I think, here's what I think is going to happen. So where's this? Bam, 384. I think Nvidia is going to either do a 320 or a 384, and they're going to call that the 5080. Now, it depends on what they want to do. I don't know what they're going to do, but from what I've seen with the numbers that Kopai Kimi has shown, logically speaking, it sounds like they probably are going to do something like this, where they're going to do, who knows, 5080 320-bit, 5080 Ti 384-bit. Like, they could literally do that, guys, and they could say, like, hey, the 384-bit 5080 Ti will cost $1,500, or maybe they'll do like $1,400 or whatever, depending on yields. If the yields are really good, they can charge like, $1,399 or whatever, $1,500, somewhere in that range. And they call that 5080 Ti 384-bit bus. And then they have the 5080, which is like basically 320-bit bus. It's gonna be cheaper, probably $1,200, $1,000 to $1,200 in that range. So they don't go above the price of the previous generation. And I think to me, that sounds realistic. So, yeah, I kind of think that's what's going to happen. I'm pretty sure Nvidia is going to call the 384 80. I think that's what they're going to do. And you know why am I saying this? People are like, why is he saying that if that's not how it is with 40 series? Well, because of all the rumors regarding the launch of the 5080. All these rumors talking about the 5080 is going to launch first, and then the 5090 is going to come second. That, to me, again, sounds like they're going back to the Ampere style launch cycle. They're going to do the second level, like the 80 class first, because that's the one that resonates with everybody. And then they're going to do the 91 second. I think they're going to do it that way. And that's why they can sell a 384-bit card and call it a 5080. And guys, man, are you guys not like, am I the only one who remembers like how the launch cycles go? Like, am I the only one here that remembers this stuff? It seems like no one remembers this. Don't you remember Jensen getting on stage and saying like GTX GTX 1080, the new king of gaming, faster than a 980 SLI. Remember that? Do you guys remember him saying that? And then you know what he also went on to say? Later on, GTX 1070, faster than a 980 Ti. 980 Ti. He said that also. And sure enough, GTX 1070, faster than a 980 Ti. It wasn't that much faster, but it was faster, and boy, did it use a lot less power. So he's going to do the same thing, guys. When he went on stage with the 3080 GT or RTX 3080, faster than a 2080 Ti. Faster than a 2080 Ti in ray tracing. It's the same thing when he did 2080. Remember, do you guys not remember the 2080 launch? It was the same exact story. Every single time they launched these products, check this out. RTX 2080, faster than a 1080 Ti. It's faster than a 1080 Ti. And it's got GigaRays. The 1080 Ti doesn't have any GigaRays. And I love GigaRays. You remember that stuff? Am I the only one who remembers this stuff? Like, he literally said that, guys. And for real, this thing at launch beat 1080 Ti. Now, it wasn't that much faster. So that's why most people kind of ignore 20 series, because it's like, oh, he said it was faster. And it wasn't really, I mean, it was faster. Like, even Tech Power Up says it's faster, right? Like, if we go here, okay, here is 2080. And bam, right there. Look, 92% of a 2080 is a 1080 Ti. So this follows the narrative. This literally follows the narrative. The 1080 Ti is as fast as an A770. And those two cards are slower by a little bit versus a 7600, a 4060, and a 2080. And a 7600 XT is apparently 2% faster. I didn't even know that they were the same speed. So anyway, see, 2080. So he can do the same deal. Like, and check it out. Where's the 2080 Ti? Where is this thing? 2080 Ti is so far down. Here it is. 2080 Ti is only 74% of a 3080. Hence why he can go on stage and get up in front of everybody and say, RTX 3080, buy it now, faster than a 2080 Ti. So he can do the exact same thing. He can do the exact same thing. He can get on stage, because if they want to launch the 5080 first, he can get on stage and say, guys, gamers, it is safe to upgrade now. The 5080, the RTX 5080, faster than an RTX 4090. More energy efficient. No worry of melting the power. Now, he won't talk about the melting power connector. Like, let's be honest, he's not going to bring that up. But basically, they're going to talk about how we've made innovations and improvements to the pins on the connector. They're using thicker tin so they don't melt. You know, like that sort of stuff. They're going to talk about that stuff. And he's like, it doesn't have the fire hazard of the 4090, and it doesn't use as much power as the 4090. So, I wasn't alive back then. So, but see, this is why. He's gonna do it, guys. Guaranteed, they're gonna do it. They always do this. Don't fall for it. He's gonna say, or don't think that it's not gonna happen. He's going to say RTX 5080 faster than an RTX 4090. In everything. He's gonna say it, guys. I'm serious. It's gonna happen. It's gonna be a 384-bit, especially if it's a 384-bit. Do you really think a 4090 is gonna beat a 5080 that has a 384-bit Blackwell part? 384 Ada with 384 versus Blackwell 384. Who do you think is going to win? It's not even a valid question. Like, everybody should know the answer to I think I've given you guys enough freebies here talking about the older GPUs. So, who said the 5080 is a 256-bit bus? Now, it could be a 320. It could be a 320. It's all going to come down to yields and how many of these dies they have available. So, but if they're going to do 5080 first, they're going to have to make a big splash. They're going to have to like talk it up, say it's better than a 4090 and it's cheaper than a 4090, because this is exactly what they do when they launch their new parts. Copite the person you can't eat. Who said I'm following Copite? Copite's the one saying that the... well, actually, no, I shouldn't say that. He's not saying that. Copite's not saying anything regarding the name. He's not saying anything about the names. See, the point is, who says that the 5080 can't be 384 or 320? Meanwhile, okay, wait, hold on. What's this one? Okay, this is 256. Okay. But see, that's TU104. That's obvious because that's TU104. But look at this. 3080, 102. How do we know he isn't Copite? Yeah, I mean, yeah, right? Like, okay, Copite is not announcing the products. It's like, he's just telling you guys the theoretical limit of these dies. That's what he's saying. Scroll down in the video cards article. According to Copite, okay, according to Copite, why are we saying Copite? Is it Copite or is it Copite? Like, I don't know how to say this name. Whatever. There are two more Blackwell GPUs. GB206, blah, blah, blah. Okay. Both feature... You guys, these aren't coming out until next year. Both feature 128, blah, blah, blah. Okay, yeah, whatever. Who cares? This is low-end stuff. The configuration of the this is the stuff that Intel Blackwell has to deal with. Or not, did I say Intel Blackwell? Intel Battlemage is going to be stuck dealing with GB206 and GB207. Like, that's going to be the battleground for Intel's Battlemage. Okay, the configuration of GB206 should match that of 8106. But the GB207, blah, blah, blah. I don't understand. What is the point of this? What is this? Wait, did he say this? Did he say this? I don't think he said this. This table is garbage. This table is complete garbage. This did not come from him. This is basically... Who wrote this article? How come Video Cards does not publish who their authors are? Like, who wrote this article? Because whoever wrote the article has said that. All he said is this. That's what he said. He didn't say that. He didn't name the stuff. Okay? He never... Did he name it? This is Panzer. It's 52, da-da-da-da. No. No one ever gave it a name. Look at the older leaks. Did he actually... Can you link one in the channel? Link me one that has him actually naming the parts. Because I don't think he ever named the parts. See, all he ever did was state this. You can't go by the names of the parts. This is the reason why. This is the reason why I can say that the 5080 is going to be a 320 or 384-bit part. Especially if it's launching first. If it's a 256, then they're not going to launch it first. I mean, they could. They could, if it's like insanely fast, they could. Like if it's like a 1080 all over again, then they could launch it first and it could still be a 256. But no, I don't think so. So I think the 5080, I think they're gonna do like a bigger bus. Basically, what I'm saying is they could do 5080 on a 102 because there's nothing stopping them from doing that. They've literally done that before. They did it 4 years ago. Okay, that's what I'm saying. So if they launch the 5080 first, because the rumors state that the 5080 is going to launch first before the 5090. So that would basically mean that to me implies two things. It means that they're very confident in the 5080. If this rumor is in fact true, that means they're very confident in the 5080's performance against all the other older GPUs, including the 4090. That also indicates that GDDR7 brings a lot of improvements to memory bandwidth that could translate into performance uplifts for everything, including ray tracing. And that also means that if they really are serious about launching it first, it would probably need to have a decent margin or a decent lead over the 4090. So that's why and in order for them to pull all those things off in a convincing manner, it's probably going to have to be a 320 or 384. But it's probably going to be 320 because the more I think about it, the more I go back to what I wrote earlier. Let's change this. Let's change it somewhat. This could be 320. Now, if that's 320, then this could be the 384. However, I think I'm going to go ahead and say that they might do this. Actually, this would be 24 and 384 GDDR7. This they could do. Does this make sense? This way, they can price these parts more in the line of like $1,000 to $1,400, maybe $1,500. They could price it in that range, and they could keep the top end of the consumer market in that sub $2,000 price range. And then at the very top, they can have this thing at $2,500, or which is where their Titan class product existed. So they could do that if they wanted. Because think about it like this. If they're going to price these parts at $1,000 and above, they can achieve enough profit margin on each unit sold such that it justifies segmenting that top die, that GB202, at the market. Because all of the 80 and 90s are going to be over $1,000. This is well understood. Like, anyone who thinks that they're going to be able to buy an RTX 5090 for $699, like in the good old days, I'm here to tell you, I'm sorry, that's not reality anymore. That's not how the world works anymore. The 5080 is going to be minimum $1,000 to $1,200, just like the 4080. That is where it's going to sit in the product stack. So, and they can justify a 320-bit part at that $1,200 market because who's going to stop them? Who's going to stop them? They're going to price it at like $1,200 or $1,199, just like the 2080 Ti, just like the 4080 when it launched, and everyone's going to gobble it up. All the Nvidia diehards are going to buy them on launch day. You're not going to be able to buy your Founders Edition from Best Buy because it's going to be scalped instantly, and that's how it's going to go. So, yeah, they can price it at $1,200, and it's going to sell out instantly during the pre-order craze. Guaranteed. Guaranteed that's going to happen. So, at that price point, it's going to happen. All right, now this one will probably be like $1,400, $1,500. Now, I don't know when this will come out, but this probably, I mean, this might not actually be, this might be like 20 gigs or something. I don't know. Yeah, this, so here, okay, since we're talking about price, let's go ahead and do the price prediction. Let's go ahead and put those in there, because people are probably going to be like, oh no, I can't afford it. So this one, 2,499. Let me move that over. So that one's gonna be priced like that. This one is gonna be priced at probably $14.99, or it could be $15.99, just like the 4090. But I'm just gonna go ahead and say $14.99. And then this one is I'm gonna say like $11.99. This is gonna be basically the 4080 and the 2080 Ti price all over again. Nvidia seems to like this price, so at launch. So these are the prices, and we'll see how accurate I end up being, because these videos either age like milk or they age like fine wine. So, and then this I don't know. I'm not actually paying attention to these 256, because this is not the top die. So this is where it kind of like starts getting kind of weird, and it's harder to predict. But that's not coming out this year, so we're going to delete that one. So this is what I think is the potential product lineup that we could see. Now, people are probably asking like, okay, what about the 512 GB202 RTX 5090 Ti? The 5090 Ti. Hold on, let me do some math here. Let me do some quick math. Okay, so this would be 32 gigabytes of VRAM on a 512-bit bus of GDDR7. Interesting. $7,000 for the professional part. So somewhere around there. Okay, that is basically the reality. So if they do launch this in the consumer market, it'll probably be priced at $3,200. Possibly. Because once you start going up the chart on the pricing, once your price goes above $1,000, the laws of physics and economics no longer apply, and prices just kind of start scaling non-linearly. So that's the reason why people are like, how am I getting this price? Well, it's because that's most likely what's going to happen. So, or it'll just be 3,000 flat, but I think they're going to tack on another 200. So that is kind of what we're looking at in terms of the potential stack. Because everybody was worried about, I've been hearing a lot of people, myself included, earlier this year, we were all saying how the 5090 is probably not going to be that much faster than the 4090, and the 5080 will probably be the same or worse than the 4090. Well, here's the reality, guys. If Nvidia does what I have shown here, they will get the performance uplifts. They will get the performance uplifts. Rest assured, they will get those uplifts. With these bus widths, their 90 class product will definitely beat the 4090, hands down. In fact, the 5080 will most likely beat the 4090. With a 320-bit bus combined with GDDR7 and the advancements that the Blackwell architecture brings, rest assured, the 5080 will handily beat the 4090. And we haven't even looked at like how ray tracing performance will improve with this next generation. So, yeah, even the weakest and cheapest GB202 will beat the 4090 consistently across the board. Because, guys, unlike AMD, Nvidia doesn't mess around with their new products. When they bring the new products, they make the new products look better than the old products. This is like a Nvidia 101 marketing strategy. You prove to the consumer that your newer product is better than your older product. No matter what, they will do it. The $1,200 5080 will beat a $2,000 or whatever, $1,800, whatever the average selling price of a 4090 is, $1,600 for Founders Edition. It will beat a $1,600 4090 with these specs. So, Matt's saying you don't think Nvidia will do. They will if they price it high enough. If they price the 80 tier high enough, they will do it. The 4080 Ti was a 103. Yeah, but again, we're not talking about that. Nvidia doesn't have to follow the way they do their product. They move things around. You can't just use one previous generation. Case in point, GTX 1080 was GP 104. 104. 1080 was a 104 die. So that's what I'm saying. You cannot just look at like, oh, that was an 03. That means the next 80 has to be a 10. No, that logic doesn't apply. You can't always use that when you're trying to predict Nvidia's products. So, yeah, and that was a $700 graphics card. They were selling a 104 at $700. So I get what you're saying. Like, it's gonna be hard. This is harder to justify, but we don't know what these prices would be. Like, these prices might be higher. This might be $1,400, $1,300. This might be $1,600, $1,700. I think that's gonna be what it is. That to me is, out of all of these prices, the one that I'm the most confident on is probably this one, and maybe this one. But again, I don't know what they're gonna name these. I don't know if they're gonna actually use these names. They might name these something else. In fact, I don't even think we're gonna get this. I don't think this one's gonna come to the consumer market unless you're buying a workstation part. So this top one, like, we already didn't get the 4090 Ti this generation. So there's a good chance that we don't get this for consumer. Now, the reason why I think they could... So here's the thing. Here are my thoughts on the 5090 Ti. Assuming the 512 is the real deal. And we don't... Keep in mind, guys, that we are speculating. We're speculating off of rumors. So this could all be fake. But if we're doing this... if this is in fact a 512-bit part, I can totally see Nvidia trying to scoop up AI sales in the consumer market because this is a 32 gigabit card. But the 32 gigabyte is still not enough to run the billion parameter LLMs. So it's kind of like a weird thing where I don't see them bringing this to the consumer market. So I actually don't think this is going to exist in the consumer market. At least not until 2026. Yeah, we don't know if the 512 thing is real or not. But what I'm saying, guys, you have to remember, like, if you're given data, like if someone tells you 512-bit, give me the product segment. Okay, do you guys understand my train of thinking? I'm not just like, oh, this is the real deal. No, this could all be fake. But if somebody told me, here are some specs, now I want you to create different product tiers off of the spec. So like if someone told me 512 is the maximum, the 100% of its true power is 512, now create a product stack with that die. If somebody did that to me, and if I saw a rumor about 448, this is what I would come up with. This is what I would create. If I was a product manager at Nvidia right now, and if I was tasked with creating product segments for the consumer GPU market with the GB202, what would I come up with? This is my homework. This is what I would do. Okay. GB202 could only be a 168 SM GPU max for all we know, and it doesn't even have. Yeah, we don't know, but remember, look, you understand what I'm saying? I'm saying if someone gives me some specs, like if someone says, okay, 512-bit is the maximum, you can figure out the RAM based off of the math, that's why we have the 32, and then it's like, okay, it's GDDR7, that's irrelevant. The GDDR7, that doesn't matter, I don't care. Like, just give me the memory bus and the potential RAM, and then it's like, create products from that die. This is what I would come up with. And this is how I would segment it. Now, I don't know if this is what I would actually price it at. I think the price of this is actually supposed to be higher. But I think this is actually a really good deal. If I was Nvidia, I'm thinking, man, this is like way too low. That price, you need to bring that price up. That needs to be $4,000. That needs to be at least $3,500, if not $4,000. So, but you can't make this go that much higher. In my mind, 3,000 is kind of the upper limit for a consumer GPU that has 32 gigs of VRAM, because in order to justify, $4,000, $6,000, $5,000, $7,000 price points, you have to have way more VRAM. So this would, like, okay, the $7,000 version of the 5090 Ti, that'll be a 64 gigabyte GPU. The problem with these leaks is there's no die size. The GPU needs to be larger than the 8102. Does it, though? Do we know the size of the... Oh, we don't know the size of the die. But does it actually need to, though? And the reason why I'm saying that is because if you go back to the older GPUs... Here, I'm just going to use this one as an example. So, what about this? Radeon 7. Radeon 7 had a 4096-bit bus. 4096-bit bus. And it was a 331 millimeter die. With a 4096... Okay, this is probably a dumb comparison because this is like HBM2. But you get what I'm saying. You can't be like, oh, well, how do you tell what the bus width is if it's, blah, blah, blah. We can look at another example. Let's look at a RX 290X or R9 290X. Like, check this one out. This one, 512-bit bus. What's the die size? 438 millimeters squared with a 512-bit bus. So who is to say that we know absolutely how Nvidia is going to re-architect the Blackwell die to fit consumer GPUs? See, that's what I'm saying. So we don't actually know. You're saying look at the 2080 Ti. I mean, the 2080 Ti is a 384? Oh, 352. That's weird. 352. Okay, that's 352. I thought it was 384. Okay, 352. Man, this thing's awful. Okay, 754. 754 with a 352-bit 102. So this is a 12 nanometer. So, yeah, I don't know, man. We have no idea. Like, it's kind of pointless to try to speculate on the die size. We can't speculate on the die size. But what we can do is we can take, like, a rumor and we can derive products from that rumor. You see what I'm saying? You can't... If you don't have all the data, you have to go off of what you're given to extrapolate the potential products from that info, even if it is a rumor. So, I mean, this is basically how I come up with the products, not knowing what they're actually doing, So that's why, like, we don't even know. See, we're assuming that Nvidia is, like, rinsing and repeating, copy-pasting the same stuff every generation. Like, we don't know if Blackwell is going to have some significant changes to how they, interconnect the shaders to the memory and all that, you know, like there could be some differences there. So, because I mean, AMD's architectures have changed so many times. You know, they had 512-bit, then they went to like super wide 4096, then they went to 2048, then they went back up to 4096, then they went all the way down to 256. So there's too many unknowns. You can't just be like, oh, we don't know the die size, so we can't figure it out. Like, you don't know what they're going to change architecturally that could still make it be that they could do a 512-bit theoretical bus. Now, will they actually bring that to market and consumer? I'm very doubtful. I don't think that's going to happen. So, but anyway, that was Nvidia's Blackwell. Probably a more interesting thing. Okay, so that is Blackwell. This is realistic though. I feel like this is kind of, I don't know about the $3,000 thing. I feel like that's either low or high depending on who you ask. But these to me, these price points make sense. They actually make a lot of sense. But I don't think this is going to come to market. So I would say these are the ones to pay attention to. $50, $80, $20 Yeah, I'm going to tell you right now, like, here's the thing, guys. Here's the thing. Everyone was complaining about 4080 being too expensive. The 4080 at $1,200 is too expensive. It's bad value. Oh, don't get it. It's an easy upsell to the 4090. Okay, well, you know what? If this is the price of the 5090 and this is the price of the 5080, that's not an easy upsell anymore. You see what I'm saying? Like, if Nvidia does this, it's like only the most die-hard Nvidia fanboys who absolutely must play at 4K resolution on an OLED or whatever, like, those are the guys that are gonna buy, they're gonna wail for this part. Like, no joke. Like, that's what's gonna happen. Like, realistically, that is what is gonna happen. But guess what, guys? It's reverse psychology. If the 5090 is so expensive that it's out of reach for the average gamer who considers high-end hardware, they're just going to be so off-putted that, like, this is going to off-put so many people at $2,500. They're going to, like, you're trying to scam me now. That is going to make the 5080 the hero. That is going to make the $1,200 part now psychologically. See, do you guys see what I'm saying? Like, look at it, guys. Look at it. RTX 4090 was $1,599. RTX 4080 was $1,199. So what is the difference? That's $1,600 versus $1,200. That's a $400 difference. So the upsell potential, and the reason why everyone's complaining, oh, it's so bad value, it's because this was like somehow magically really good value. But here's the thing. If they price the 5090 like this, now all of a sudden they've classically conditioned you to believe that $1,199 all of a sudden is actually good value. It's actually good value. So, because this is what they want. They want to classically condition, they want to brainwash gamers into normalizing internally with themselves and their wallet that $1,199 is an acceptable price point for an 80 class product. They failed miserably last generation with 4080 because this was priced too low. It was because it was priced too low. They're not going to screw up again. This time around, they're going to basically go back to 20 series pricing with 30 series segmentation. I'm going to write that down. Nvidia could return to RTX 20 series pricing with RTX 30 series market segmentation. This is what they could do with the next generation. You understand what I mean by that? 20 series pricing. 20 series pricing. RTX, or Titan RTX, was $2,499. $11.99. RTX 2080 Ti was $11.99. They want this. They want to go back to this. This is the reason. This is the answer why $24.99 will most likely be the new price of the 5090. This is what I mean when I say return to 20 series pricing. 20 series pricing. With RTX 30 series market segmentation, meaning 5080 is a lot like a 3080. And it is considered the hero, the value king. This is the potential strategy for Nvidia's Blackwell consumer desktops. You have to keep in mind, and people are probably like, this doesn't make sense, that's way too much money. Well, newsflash, AI's here to stay, and Nvidia's making so much money on AI so that if so, they don't honestly, they don't care. If a gamer can't afford this reality, get out. That's basically Nvidia's message. If you're a gamer and you want our 50 series top tier stuff and you can't pay $1,200 for a 5080 or you don't want to pay $2,500 for a 5090, you know what Nvidia's telling a gamer? Get out. GTFO. I don't care. Get out. Go get AMD. I could care less. That's Nvidia's attitude now because Nvidia has potential competition that's going to approach over the next couple of years in the form of other players in the AI space. So they don't have time to haggle with counter haggle gamers on consumer desktop parts anymore. Like I told you guys last week, Nvidia's now a god tier company. They don't care if a gamer can't afford $1,200 or $2,500 for their GPU. They literally could care less. So that's the reality. Seriously, that is the reality. And if you're not on board with that, then unfortunately, Nvidia's not the brand for you. And that is the truth. That is the hard, cold reality. Because they got to keep those profit margins, because they got to keep the shareholders happy. They just did their 10-for-1 split earlier this week, back on Monday. And they need to keep the profit margin high because they're competing with so many other people buying up TSMC wafers. That is why Jensen Huang was criticized for that. Somewhere he said something to the lines of TSMC should raise their prices on wafers even higher. Like somebody somewhere said that Jensen said that. I don't know if he actually said that. I didn't find the article, but somebody said that Jensen claimed when he was there that TSMC should raise their prices again. And the reason why he would say something like that is because he wants to make it such that the competitors like AMD and Intel and these other guys like Qualcomm, they feel less inclined to want to buy as many of the latest and greatest TSMC wafers because he doesn't want to be kneecapped by production capacity that he can purchase from TSMC. You guys see what I'm saying? See, you guys, the average gamer who's like, I want my 5090 at $1,500. I don't want to spend. Those people are like so little brain in the grand scheme of things when they're not thinking about the big picture. They're not thinking about the business applications and implications of what is happening in the market for Nvidia. That is the cold truth, and that is the reality, and that is why these prices are the way they are. The only reason why, we don't need to talk about the Samsung node. That is so irrelevant at this point in time. Like that statement completely misses the point. Talking about Samsung 8 nanometer when we're talking about Blackwell and TSMC competitor, like other companies competing for the same wafer, that's missing the point. That's not thinking about like what we're actually referring to here. So that, that's not, no, like, so meaning the lowest Nvidia can go on a GB202 is around $1,200. That's the lowest I can see them doing. I can see Nvidia launching a 5080 with a 320 bit part GDDR7 and pricing it as low as $1,200, and they will market that thing like crazy. And in their minds, it's justified because to them, that's a really good deal. You're getting GB202 at $1,200. That's a steal in their mind. When you look at their product stack. Now, they might not do that. They might not sell the 5080 like a 320-bit. They might do 256 on GB103, and they might try to price it at the same amount of money if they want to milk the gamer crowd. I mean, they could do that too. They could literally repeat the 40 series again and draw the wrath and ire of the tech reviewers saying how they're ripping off gamers, selling them lower-end silicon dies at higher-end premium prices. So they could do that again. I mean, we don't actually know what they're going to do. All of what you're seeing here is hypothetical, but you guys have to understand that when I make these statements, this is all based off of me looking at the overall market demographics, the market dynamics that Nvidia is having to deal with and navigate through all of that. And that's how I'm drawing these conclusions. I'm not just like, oh, I think it should be this and that. No. This is not like random things off the wall. No, this is based off of reading the rumor and trying to make sense of if that rumor were true, how would you segment the product? And then you have to also look at the business case. What did they sell these parts at before? That's why I said 20 series pricing. And then if they want to make themselves look really, really good and not continue to hurt their image in the gaming market, then they would, they would segment it like a 30 series. To me, this is reasonable. What I'm saying here, what I've written on the board here, does not seem unreasonable at all. It sounds very logical. Now, is it going to be true? Who knows? This could all be wrong. It could be dead right, 100%. It could be horribly wrong, and they just repeat 40 series all over again. Or it could be somewhere in between. Maybe some of these are correct, and maybe others are wrong. Who knows? But that's the fun thing about speculating on these sort of products as an enthusiast. HDX is saying that you're glad you went AMD. Backed out of not making a high-end GPU and RDNA. Yeah, because the problem is, see, here's the thing, guys. Like, the fact that so many people bought 4090s, I mean, they could do 5080. Like, okay, let's pretend that the 5080 Ti is the 5080. Let's remove this Ti name. Now let's pretend that, let's remove this. What if the two in the middle are the actual products? Now $1,500 makes a lot more sense. 384-bit bus at $1,499, that's very similar to the 4090. But if they do in fact have something larger, like a 448, that could be the 5090, and the 5080 could become the 384-bit at $1,499, or somewhere in that range. Because what I can see them doing is they can further separate the performance and the price. We're talking about roughly a $1,000 price difference now versus a $400 price difference on the previous generation. So these are things that I think that the average gamer, when they try to guess or talk with their friends, like, oh, what do you think this is going to be? They're not really looking at the big picture. Oftentimes, what I've realized talking with people in this space in the PC DIY community, like the general takeaway is that I don't think they understand the full business dynamics that are at play here when they're trying to justify why something should be priced the way it is, or why something should be named something else, or whatever. You know, like they're not analyzing it on a very deep level that takes into account the node, the historical prices, the potential competition, or lack of, which could basically mean they can price hike like crazy, and also like how successful the product was, how the current generation is, and how much they can try to milk the gamers with price hikes and try to play that off as, oh, well, development costs for GPUs are skyrocketing, so we have to raise the price and blah blah blah. I mean, they can make whatever excuse it is, whether it's legitimate or not, and that's just how they get away with raising the price over time. And the reality is, someone might be like, "Oh, they're raising the prices." Well, realistically, they're not raising the prices. I mean, I've just proven here that they're not really raising the prices. See, so anyway, that's Nvidia's Blackwell. Now let's talk about what I think is going to be even more interesting. So I think a lot of people probably thought that was an interesting diversion, but let's delete all of this Nvidia stuff. Let's change topics here. Let's talk about AMD's hypothetical roadmap, because I think that this one is probably going to be the most interesting topic, and this is the final topic of the live stream. This is going to be AMD's hypothetical roadmap. So I was listening to the video from Steve Burke and Steve, what was his name? Steve Walton or something. The other Steve from Hardware Unboxed. So I listened to that video the other day, where the two of them were talking in Taiwan, and they were like, is AMD's Radeon group actually screwed? It was kind of like when Steve and Gordon had the Is Intel Screwed series that they were doing. I think this is a very relevant discussion, and I have my own thoughts on that. So let's get into that. So AMD Radeon, they sort of exist at a weird crossroads, the way I see it. I don't, to an outsider, someone looking in, so basically as a consumer looking at AMD and how they exist in the market today, I kind of think of them as they're definitely like the second GPU brand. They're kind of like that other GPU brand that you know is kind of there, but no one really talks about them. And there's lots of reasons why that is. So let's talk about some of the weaknesses. Let's talk about the weaknesses of Radeon. So I'll ask the chat, give me some weaknesses of the Radeon brand. So let's try to analyze why it is that Steve and Steve would make that video as to whether or not Radeon is actually screwed. You know what? I want to clean some of this off more. I want to remove these things. Yeah, let's get rid of all that stuff. Weaknesses of Radeon. Okay, weak RT performance. Features for quality of upscaling. Okay, history. Now this one, I don't know if this one is actually relevant. I feel like this history of driver issues, that one to me, I don't think is actually relevant today. I feel like this is an artifact of a previous time that for some reason AMD has struggled to get past this as their reputation. Because honestly, I have not had any driver issues with AMD cards in a very, very long time. So the last time I had issues with AMD cards was 2015, which was literally like 9 years ago. So I personally don't see number 3 as a thing, but I guess some other people, like for some reason that reputation has been stuck with them, and they've had a very, very difficult time getting over that for some reason. All right, let's move on. Consoles, mobile gaming. I think AMD is big there. That's not a weakness, Max. That's a strength. Lack of dedicated AI cores. Okay, lack of dedicated AI, or I was gonna say tensor hardware, but we'll just say, okay, we'll just put in quotes AI cores. Okay, what else? Anything else? I'll add one. Lack of, how should I say this? I want to say like lack of marketing, but it's more, it's not, that's just a very generic term. It's really just like lack of, like people just don't, I guess, lack of field presence. I'm going to use a card game terminology, field presence. Radeon has a lack of planning? Radeon has a lack of planning? In what way? I think I misspelled that, right? It's there. Lack of field presence. Radeon has a lack of planning. You're gonna have to expand on that, Nero. I don't understand what you mean by lack of planning. Oh, price segmentation? Planning? Oh, yeah, I know what you're talking about. Steve and Steve mentioned something similar to that. Honestly, I don't know if that's true. I feel like they definitely seem more reactionary. Or here's the thing, it's not that Nvidia is not reactionary. It's just Nvidia is so dominant that they can be stubborn and get away with it. AMD has a much harder time pulling that off. That's the difference. But how would you categorize that? I don't think that's lack of planning. Initial prices were not desirable. Only one card, though. Only one card. So I don't know if... Okay, maybe there's another card. Maybe there's an argument for the 7700 XT as well, being overpriced. But I see what you're saying. So yeah, those two cards, but they don't always do that though. See, I'm gonna give them the benefit of the doubt. I'm not gonna put that down because that only happened with this one generation. So I don't think, meaning that's not a history. That's not a historical problem. Energy efficiency is kind of bad compared to Nvidia. It is this generation. It wasn't always like that. But okay. We'll just say behind in perf per watt. $6,000 series were good. Yeah, see, that's what I'm saying. Like, when we talk about, when we're trying to find fundamental weaknesses, you can't look at one GPU generation and just call out the problems with one GPU generation. See, the thing that makes this list, the things that get on this list are things that are general, repeatable behaviors and trends. You cannot call out like, oh, the 7900 XT was priced too close to the... That doesn't matter because that's like that's one product in the grand scheme of things. That's very different than saying weak RT performance. Because this applies to everything, and this is applied to multiple generations. Same thing with this one, potentially the same thing with this one in the past. This is true. Lack of field presence, no one really knows who they are. And then behind a perf per watt. I mean, this has been the case most of the time. It's true this generation. It's true with the generation before RDNA 2, or I guess it was like GCN. GCN basically had this as a problem like all the time. So yeah, for like a decade, they were kind of behind. So okay, so I think this is a good list. Let me kind of add some other ones. So I would say now I'm gonna give you guys more technical ones that you guys are probably not even aware of. Do I want to put this here? The chat's kind of over there. Here, let's just put this over here. Okay, I'm gonna add some high idle power with multi. Well, how should I say this? I guess that's like one way to say it. The VRAM clock doesn't have enough power stages with multi-monitor / multi refresh rate. I don't know how to say that. Like multi refresh, multi-monitor, multi-refresh. I did a video on that. So that's one. This one is definitely a more technical one. Transient spikes are like bad or are less competitive, or I guess not as well regulated. We'll say that. Okay. So this one, I'm just gonna say this one is high idle power with multi-monitor, multi-refresh. So I'm just gonna rewrite that one. So it was 80 watts of idle on it. Well, you have to have multi-monitor for it to do that. It won't do that with one monitor. That's why I have to specify it is with multi-monitor and multi-refresh on multi-monitor for you to see that. Okay, so yeah, they have not fixed that. So and they're not gonna be able to fix that. The only way they're gonna fix that is with an architectural change or a fundamental change with the way the vertical blanking is handled by the driver. That's the only way they're gonna fix that. So that problem is actually a feature. It's never gonna go away. So I'm just telling you right now, this problem, a lot of people consider this a problem, but this is not. This is a fundamental design limitation that it can only be mitigated to such a degree. It cannot actually be resolved via a driver update. It has to be fixed with a new architecture. That's the only way they're going to be able to fix this permanently. Okay, one of the ways they fixed it was with HBM. I'll tell you guys right now, one of Radeon's attempts at fixing this problem was to go with HBM because the Fury and Vega and the Radeon 7 never had this problem. And that's because HBM never consumed a lot of power. When you have multiple monitors, I have a YouTube video that explores this topic in depth. So we're not going to waste too much time talking about this. But anyway, these are things that I feel like when I look at AMD's product, when I'm evaluating their product, these like 7 and 8 are what makes me think like these guys are stuck being the silver medalist and Nvidia stuck being the gold standard because AMD, has these quirks that they can't really get rid of without new hardware. Like, that's the reality. Like, this stuff, it's like, yeah, you can, okay, a lot of this stuff, the only way you're going to be able to fix pretty much all these things, except for this driver issue that people are complaining about, although I don't really see that problem anymore, and I guess lack of field presence, so that's lack of marketing, or however you want to say that. Most of these can only be resolved with new hardware, a new generation. That is the only way these things will be resolved. That's the reality. RDNA 3 is a first-gen chiplet GPU. Yeah, it is, but that doesn't really matter. Like, that's like an architectural thing. That's not a weakness. So, Omega and Crimson days. Yeah, the last time I had a driver problem was with the R9 290X or R9 390X. It was a long time ago, and I resolved the problem by switching to Fury. R9 Fury like fixed all those problems. So they eventually fixed it, but you know, like AMD with some of these things, like it can take them a couple of months to fix some of this stuff. So that's what I'm saying. Like, there's a reason why things are the way they are. There are dedicated AI cores on RDNA 3 since they have 2 for every compute unit. Okay, so maybe this one's a lack of the public's understanding. But see, Matt pointed out that they do technically have some form of AI cores. Well, but the fact that somebody said that this was a weakness, and I actually wrote it down, that kind of goes hand in hand with lack of field presence. Lack of customer education of their product. See? Isn't that RT cores, not AI? AMD doesn't have any driver issues since RDNA 1. Yeah, I agree, HD. I have not had any severe driver issues. Actually, I never had any driver issues with RDNA 1. I have 5700 XT. I didn't have any problems. So I don't know. You had to do a lot to fix the crashing issue, but see, was that really a driver issue? Like, did you have to change the driver version to fix the problem? Because if you had to do some Windows thing or some like PSU change or something, then that to me is not really a driver issue. But it depends on what you did to fix the problem. So, anyway, okay, so basically, a lot of the stuff that we wrote down can be addressed with new hardware. It can't really be resolved, at least most of them. Some of them they can. It's like, what can we address without changing hardware? 5 can be fixed. 3 can be fixed. This is more like a customer knowledge thing. So, but realistically, like 1, 2, 6, 7, and 8, they all need new hardware to fix those things. HD 6000. Yeah, I never had HD 6000. I had HD 5000 and HD 7000. 6000 was the off generation for me. Like, that's the one that I skipped over. So I had a HD. Well, anyway, we're getting off track on that. But so these are the things that they need to address, I think, fundamentally. I think if you like, here's the thing: people are like, oh, well, field presence and all that stuff. Well, how do you fix that? First of all, if these go away, I think then the product cleans up a lot of like how it's perceived by an actual user. And yeah, but Matt, that still requires new hardware. See, what I'm saying is, when I say like these things, this requires new hardware. You can't do a firmware update. You can't do a driver update to fix these things. These are fundamental things that the only way you're going to get significant uplifts is with next generation hardware. They would have to make the choice to reduce raster allocation on the die. Yeah, and that's where it gets hard. So, these are the things that... Okay, now let's talk about roadmap, because I think this will make it more clear. Let's talk about AMD's hypothetical roadmap. I'm going to go ahead and say AMD's... We'll say potential roadmap. The future. The future of Radeon. Let's say, let's not say AMD. let's say Radeon. Let's say Radeon, because I want to make sure we're talking about Radeon. We're not talking about AMD as a whole, because I don't want to drag Ryzen into this, because Ryzen has nothing to do with this. So this is only Radeon. Because the Radeon brand is what's struggling. This is what they're having problems with. And the reality is the problems are only going to get worse and harder to resolve, because you have ARM pushing into the laptop market, and you have Intel trying to catch up in discrete and in mobile GPUs. So, but and Nvidia is kind of irrelevant. Like I said earlier, Nvidia is kind of like AMD basically has to fix all of this. They have to fix all of these things and more things. This is not the only thing. Like, the list is actually way longer than this. But the video would be, this live stream would be way too long if we tried to nitpick every single thing. So here's what I think is going on. So, let's see, RDNA 5. Now, I don't know about RDNA 4. I feel like RDNA 4 is not going to address a lot of these things. I think RDNA 5, or maybe a new name that's not RDNA, but I'm probably just going to call it RDNA 5. RDNA 5 will be a new design with dedicated RT hardware, with dedicated AI hardware. So think Tensor cores or whatever we want to call that stuff. Now, I would like it if they fixed the blanking, the vertical blanking, which would fix the high idle power. I mean, that's the only way they're going to do that. I hope they would fix that. But I would think that with a new design, and the fact that number 7 has literally existed on their release notes as a known issue literally for like 3 years now, you would think that at some point they probably are looking at that list and are like, well, what do we need to do, guys? Okay, well, we need to address this because everyone always seems to complain about it. And even reviewers like Tech Power Up always complain about it. So maybe they will address this with RDNA 5. Or hopefully RDNA 4. But I don't really know how much of a change RDNA 4 will be over RDNA 3. So basically what I'm saying is they need a ground up, like a new design to put them back on the map, to not only have something that competes directly with NVIDIA's entire product stack that includes the 90 class cards, but it also like fixes a lot of these problems. Because if they made a product that fixed all of these problems and competed with NVIDIA all the way up to the 90 class part, then they would be taken more seriously. I feel like people would consider them more. And it wouldn't be like, oh, they need to price their parts cheaper. Because that's not what they're going to do. So when Steve were saying, well, Steve from Hardware Unboxed was like, okay, they just need to make their stuff cheaper. That doesn't fix the problem. See, to me, that's a very surface level answer. It doesn't actually take into account the reality of the market. Like, if AMD makes, and if you look at the comments in that video, you'll see like people are saying like they can't just make it cheaper, because it's like that's not going to guarantee that someone's going to buy their part over NVIDIA because of all these other things. You know, like quality of upscaling, weak RT, blah, 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 all this lack of this, lack of that, blah, blah, blah. And then it doesn't even, that isn't even addressing 7 and 8 on this list. So, you know, like there's a thing there that AMD needs to address fundamentally, and that has nothing to do with, oh, if they lower the price, someone will want, no, that doesn't, lowering the price doesn't solve the problem. It may move more units In certain seasons, it can be done as a seasonality move, but that doesn't fix the problem for the brand. You see what I'm saying? Just lowering your price doesn't fix your problems fundamentally. So that's a band-aid fix. That's not a fundamental fix. It's not a permanent fix. So, and that's not the right strategy. And ultimately, that's definitely not what AMD wants to do. As a publicly traded company, you don't just want to like, oh, if we just drop prices across the board, that'll fix all of our problems. No, that doesn't actually solve the problem. That makes things worse, and that has a trickle-down effect that basically makes them less competitive, and over time it hurts their potential to fund more R&D and all these things. So no, that's the last thing that AMD wants to do, is to just drop prices because then we'll sell more stuff. No, that's not how it works. Even if they lower the price, Nvidia can just knock $50 off. Well, the thing is, Nvidia doesn't have to do that. Nvidia doesn't even have to do that. People, there were some comments in that video, the Steve and Steve talking video, saying that AMD could be like $200, $400 cheaper even at the same performance class, and people will be dumb enough to still buy the Nvidia product, was basically what a lot of comments were saying. So, meaning the 7900 XTX could be $400 less than a 4080 or 4080 Super, and people will still buy the 4080 Super. And this has proven to be true. Only the most well-informed people would actually jump on that deal, assuming that was real. And those were the people that bought the XTX when it was $1,000 versus $1,200 plus for the 4080. But the reality is more people bought the 4080 versus the XTX. Now, whoever says that the 7900 XTX outsells the RTX 4080 and the RTX 4080 Super, they are completely wrong, and they have no idea what they're talking about, because that's not the reality at all. The reality is that as much as people and reviewers complained about the 4080 being overpriced and bad value, the reality was the people that were complaining that were actually going to buy that card, they either sucked it up and bought the card and paid $1,200 plus for a 4080, or they were upsold to a 4090. Those were the two outcomes. Or the third outcome was they're like, I ain't spending that much money, and they bought a 4070 Ti and got ripped off even worse, because it's even worse value. So those were the three most common outcomes. The fourth outcome was don't buy anything, and the fifth outcome was they bought AMD's card. Those were the outcomes, in that order of hierarchy. So that's the reality, guys. So that's what I mean when I say, like, don't even look at Nvidia right now, because they're in a class of their own and the logic doesn't apply. The pricing logic doesn't apply. So you can't just drop your price and expect to sell more. It doesn't work. And that's the reason why AMD's prices, they kind of like hug right next to Nvidia's along that price wall. You know what I mean? People still bought 4060 Ti, 16 gig, that still costs. Yeah, I know, right? That's retarded. And people were dumb enough to do something stupid like that. Aren't the consoles dictating if desktop GPUs will get better in certain areas? Maybe, but not really. Realistically, Max, that doesn't actually occur. That doesn't actually apply, because the consoles typically have like a 10-year life cycle. Whereas hardware generations change every 2 years, every 24 months. Desktop doesn't seem much important for AMD? No, that's not true at all. Desktop is very important to AMD. The people who think that desktop's not important to AMD, they're wrong, because the thing is, the console market is a completely different market. It's a completely different business unit. A lot of people don't realize that it does get lumped in with Radeon, but it's not the same. Okay, in terms of earning reports, it is the same vertical. Radeon and semi-custom design is in the same vertical, but it's still a different product line because they're contracted to design custom solutions for Sony and Microsoft. So that is very different from Radeon and desktop and mobile GPU and all that other stuff. Sellers like Micro Center have confirmed that the 7600 XT and this are the most GPUs sold, so AMD is doing okay. Are the most GPUs sold that are AMD GPUs? Yes. Not the most GPUs sold. No. Because I can tell you right now, the 4060, the 4060 Ti, the 4070, those are all outselling those AMD cards at Micro Center. Everywhere. At all the Micro Centers. 7800 XT sells like hotcakes? Yeah, well, at least over here. In Europe, they do. Here in the US, too. Yes, but there's still a lot of people that are buying. Okay, let's put it this way. Yes, compared to the 4070, the 7800 XT was selling really well. And that's part of the reason why Nvidia countered with the Super. Because the 4070 Super actually is the best value out of all the Super cards. But that one is the one that actually sells more. Consoles don't run RT the same way. The other thing too, guys, is I feel like we're doing too, like we're taking into account build your own too much. Like as enthusiasts, we tunnel vision on like people going to a Micro Center or Newegg or Amazon and buying an individual GPU. The reality is the vast majority of gamers are buying pre-built systems from, Falcon Northwest and Origin PC and Main Gear and Alienware and HP Omen and Lenovo Legion. That is where the vast majority of the desktop gaming market exists. And guess who sells more units in those pre-builds? GeForce. GeForce outsells Radeon in the pre-built market. I don't even know what the ratio is. I don't even want to think what the ratio is. But let's just say like it's a lot higher. It's a lot higher. So, and that's the vast majority. Most average people buy pre-built. Yes. See, and that's part of the problem. That's a whole nother part of the problem that we haven't even addressed directly here. But let's talk about this hypothetical roadmap now, because I think the roadmap is where things get interesting. So let's put the years here. So we'll do 2020. It starts with 2020. 2021, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and we'll do 2027. We'll just do up to 2027. So we have 20, 21, 2022, 2024, 2026, and 2027. So you guys can, well, you may put all of them. I don't think I need to put all of them. I do want to kind of include 2019 for historical reasons. Actually, we could go even further back. But let's go ahead and put 2019 because that one is an important one. 2019. So now we're going to start talking. Now we're going to start making some predictions. So what do we know? What do we know historically? February 2019. Radeon 7. That was the final flagship. You know what? Let's use a different color. Let's use, is red going to show up well? Yeah, let's just do, red doesn't show up too well on stream. All right, Radeon 7. Radeon 7 launched. I believe the launch was February 7th, 2019. Radeon 7. World's first 7 nanometer GPU. This was the final GCN. This was GCN in its final form, in its ultimate form, 100% of its true power, like Perfect Cell in Dragon Ball Z. Like, this was GCN. GCN's last stand. And you know what it was competing with? Versus 1080 Ti versus 2080 versus, well, we won't consider 2080 Ti. It basically had to do battle with these two. This was a 2017 product. It launched right around the same time as, you guessed it, Ryzen first gen. The 1800X, which I don't know where, oh, here it is. The 1800X, the very first Ryzen flagship, first gen Ryzen, launched March 2017, right alongside the GTX 1080 Ti. That is how old the 1080 Ti is. The 1080 Ti is the same age as first gen Ryzen. Let that sink in. That is an old GPU. Radeon 7 launched in February of 2019, almost 2 years after the 1080 Ti. This is the reason why the 1080 Ti is legendary status. When AMD finally launched a GPU that could go head-to-head with the 1080 Ti, it took them nearly 2 years to do that. Meanwhile, by the time they did that, the 2080 was already out. In fact, the 2080 Ti was right there with it. Those things launched in 2018. I think it was September, if I'm not mistaken, they were September 2019 or 2018. If you look it up, 2018, 20 series is older than Radeon 7 by a couple of months, like 4, 5, 6 months. So AMD launched Radeon 7. It was supposed to be a canceled product. They decided to bring it to market anyway because one of the vice presidents of RTG, after Roger Kodori left, was like, guys, let's just throw it out there. This dude retired, and then they launched his thing that he internally worked on, and that's what Radeon 7 was. The branding was kind of random. It just kind of came out of nowhere. And that was it. World's first 7nm GPU, 16GB HBM. Guess what? Radeon 7 was insanely good at video transcoding and at video editing with programs like DaVinci Resolve. That was what it was really, really good at. So that was Radeon 7. So now, let's talk about 2022, or 2020. 2020, and you guys have heard me say this, was the magical year for AMD. 2020 was the perfect storm for AMD. 2019 kind of had a lot of interesting, good things. 2019 had 5700 XT, 5700, Zen 2, the Ryzen 3000 series. All that stuff was 2019. 2019, first 7nm first 7nm GPU. They also had the first motherboard with PCI Gen 4. So AMD was kind of like world's first. They could claim world's first in their company history for a lot of things. So these are kind of like magical times. The company was definitely coming back. But 2020 was an even better year. Why? Because RDNA 2 launched in 2020. PS5, Xbox Series X and S, Zen 3, 6800 XT, 6900 XT. All those products launched within the same 90-day window at the very end of 2020. Those were the crazy times. Those were the pandemic days. Everybody knows what I'm talking about. People had to line up to buy toilet paper outside of a Costco. That's how the world worked back then. It was the dark times. Crypto was on the rise, but that was more of a 2021 thing. Then no one could buy anything. If you wanted to buy a PS5, you had to watch Jake Randall and the meme streams with the fix it, fix it, fix it. We've talked about this in previous streams. But RDNA 2 came out regardless. It was price competitive with Nvidia. It was more energy efficient than Nvidia. And for the first time in a long time, AMD had a GPU that could compete with Nvidia's best. It was the first time. It was this is the reason why when I talk about AMD, I always have to call out 2020 as the magical year. This was a magical year for AMD. It was like the stars aligned, the planets aligned, everything went according to plan. It was like a perfect storm. For the first time in AMD's history, they were better than Intel in single thread performance. They had the best gaming CPUs. The 5800X was the king. They even had 16 core 5950X, a multi-threading monster CPU that could do gaming like crazy good too. It was so energy efficient. Like PS5, Xbox, they were all there. Everything was happening. Like that was the magical year. And it just so happens that was the pandemic year. Nvidia didn't like that. Yeah, that was the year of the 6900 XT. So, that's why that was a magical year. Now, let's talk about 2022. So, fast forward 2 years later, Q4 of 2022. What did we get? RDNA 3. And Zen 4 was a little bit earlier. We'll just go ahead and say, forget about Ryzen. So 7900 XTX, 7900 XT. They launched together. You got RDNA 3. I'm just going to use the flagships for illustrative purposes to give you guys an idea, because we're looking at roadmaps. Because we're talking about hypothetical potential roadmaps. So, where are we now? We're in 2024. Guess what? When did AMD launch their flagship? Even numbered year. When did AMD launch their previous flagship? Even numbered year. Do you guys see where we're going with this? Are you guys starting to see the patterns? Do you see why, if things go according to plan, product roadmaps are very predictable? However, AMD is less predictable than Nvidia because this came out of nowhere. No one expected it. It just kind of showed up. Also, I didn't even talk about RDNA 1. RDNA 1 launched here in the middle of 2019. July 7th, 2019. 5700 XT. You had RDNA 1 in the middle of that year. So they've done things like launch this in here and then launch this in here. So do you see why I'm saying like AMD is kind of harder to predict compared to Nvidia? Because if you go further back, AMD is historically an odd numbered year. I've talked about this in previous live streams. AMD is historically an odd numbered year company to launch next generation products for GPU. Case in point, HD 7970. This was a 2011 product. R9 290X. This was a 2013 product. R9 Fury X. This was a 2015 product. RX Vega 64 was a 2017 product. So you guys see what I'm showing you is AMD is a odd numbered. Historically, they're an odd numbered company when it comes to launching GPUs. Nvidia is an even numbered company. Just to use them as a comparison, let's go over some Nvidia parts. GTX 480 was a 2010. GTX 680 Kepler was a 2012. Now, Nvidia, we're going to skip 700 because that's the oddball. That one was 2013. But let's go with 980, 2014. GTX 1080, 2016. It goes on and on. 2080, 2018. Well, this is an R. RTX. You guys see the pattern. This is why I say timeline analysis is actually a very good way to predict when products will come out. So we can say with high degree of confidence that it is expected to see a 5080 this year, because Nvidia has a very good track record of doing 24-month product cycles. So this one is pretty much set in stone. We know that. That's not what we're trying to talk about now, though. So let's talk about RDNA. What is going to happen with RDNA 4? Is AMD going to launch an RDNA 4 part here? Because what happened was this part launched in the historical odd number year. Maybe I should have kept that. Oh well. 5700 XT was in line with AMD's product line, meaning 5700 XT was the successor to Vega 64. However, in order for AMD to pull off a massive win, they had to go out an extra year and a half, almost, to get something that was really competitive. And this is what offset AMD by 1 year, because AMD, like I have proven earlier, is an odd numbered year company when it comes to Radeon products historically. But RDNA 2 was so good, but at a cost. It was so good because it took them longer to come out with. It had a longer development cycle because they were really trying to address the fundamental weaknesses of GCN. And they succeeded. And that's why the 6000 series is one of the most celebrated Radeon series of the entire Radeon brand's history. So the 6900 XT, like, nobody thought that AMD, like, people thought, okay, AMD at best will have a 2080 Ti competitor. Well, then they launched 6800 XT. 6800 XT, hands down, flew right past the 2080 Ti and competed directly with the 3080. But then AMD didn't even stop there. They launched 1600 XT. See, that's the reason why it took them, at the cost of like an extra year of development, they were able to get back to competitive one-to-one with Nvidia. However, now you see that it's like they're falling behind again, so to speak. So, do I think we're going to see a significant product from AMD in the GPU space this year? The answer is no. I don't think we're going to see a significant product for 2024. I think they're going to go back to odd-numbered years. And I think it's in their best interest to go back to odd-numbered years. So if I had to wager when I think AMD will come out with a competitive product that can go toe-to-toe with Nvidia again, at the earliest, I think it's going to be next year. I think this is going to be like the year that we see significant new changes from RDNA or from the RTG, Radeon Technologies group. I just think they need more time. With how complex and competitive the GPU space is getting, especially with all this AI acceleration stuff that's going on, especially with the fact that, like we just pointed out, all this, the weak RT, quality of upscaling, all this other stuff, to address all of this, it requires new hardware and it requires a longer development cycle to get competitive hardware out the door. So I don't think we're going to see anything from RDNA, from Radeon this year that is any significant change to how things have been. Supposedly they will announce X3D. What is that? That has nothing to... Oh, along with RDNA 4 GPUs in November. Are you sure about that RDNA 4 stuff? Do we know that for a fact? Where is that coming from? Where's this RDNA 4 stuff coming from? How do you think AMD is going to approach RDNA 4 if it ends up similar to RDNA 1? I think you're right, Marcelo. I think that's the right train of thought. I think they're going for a system reset again. I think RDNA 4 is like a bridge, and RDNA 5 is the actual product. So I think it's this, guys. I think it's this kind of thing all over again. And what's the distance between these two? About 1.5 years. This was July. This was July of 2019. This was December of 2020. That's literally like 1.5 years apart. So if RDNA 4... So let's put this into perspective. If RDNA 4 comes out at the end of this year, in like, someone was saying November. So if we say this is RDNA 4, at about 1.5 to 2 years. Oh, so you know what? If that's true, I don't think we're gonna see anything. Okay, hold up. Hold up. Let me uncircle that. Okay, so let's say RDNA 4 comes out at the end of 2024. In whatever form that ends up being. Then, realistically, 2026 is the year then. Most likely. Now, that's not 100% set in stone. They don't have to repeat this. They don't have to do like a whole 1.5 years. I don't know their development cycle. Now, what we're going to talk about next is how long it takes to develop these GPU architectures. But if they go by the same trend, then you add 1.5 years. So that would mean... Okay. That would mean summer 2026 is RDNA 5. Which actually is like a full reset. And most likely, this addresses all of that. So that's a pretty far way up. That's about 2 years from now. We're 2 years out. And in a way, it makes sense when you consider like a 5-year development cycle. So let's talk about how accurate is this prediction? How accurate is this prediction? So let's think about this. RDNA 2 came out 2020. When did Vega come out? RX Vega 64 was summer 2017. That was AMD's last big GCN. That was their last like super high-end GPU of the GCN architecture. Radeon 7 was a 7 nanometer shrink of the Vega 64 with double the VRAM. That's all Radeon 7 was. It was the same architecture. So fundamentally, 2017. That was the end of that was the last big GCN. So let's now look at RX 6900 XT. This was winter or fall. We'll say Q4. It's better to say the quarter. Q4 2020, whereas Vega 64 was a Q3 2017. So the time between these two parts was 3.5 years, almost, give or take. So 3.5 years. Interesting. Now let's look at RDNA RX 7900 XTX. This was Q4 2022. So the difference between Vega and RDNA 3 was 5 years. And the reason why I want to, 5.5 years. The reason why I want to point out this one, the dependency between these two, is because this was chiplet. This was interposer HBM2. So keep that in mind. And the reason why I'm pointing that out is because the way a lot of chip design roadmaps are done is you basically have you have multiple teams developing a product, but you offset them. So you typically have one team developing a product and it has a certain development time frame. Then you have another team developing another product which has its developed timeline. And the reason why you do that is that way you have product every 24 months because you're trying to keep up with the stretching out of Moore's Law. Because Moore's Law was typically 18 months. That's not true anymore. That's why people say it's dead, but it's technically still alive. It's just that it's stretched. It's just not 18 months anymore. So it's more like 24 months to, depending on the product, 24 to like 32 months, 36 months, 3 years. So that's why I want to call your attention to Vega 64 and 7900 XTX, because I would probably say that the team. So let's now keep in mind this is hypothetical. So I don't know if this is fact, but what I'm going to say is we'll say Team A made Vega 64. Team B made RDNA 2. Team A made RDNA 3. So why am I simplifying things this way? Because if you think about it, Vega and RDNA 3 are similar in their design fundamentals. They both use chip interposer designs to use chiplet style GPUs. Now, the XTX is the first to market with like a true kind of multi-chip design, if you will, for the GPU. But Vega 64 was the first, well, not really the first, technically that was Fury, but Vega had the HBM2 and it used the interposer design. So I would wager that perhaps the team that worked on Vega was the same team that developed the RDNA 3 chiplet-based GPUs. Meanwhile, Team B made the traditional GPU designs, the monolithics that had GDDR. Now, obviously, RDNA 3 uses GDDR, but Team B was the one that probably did the RX 480. So if we go further back, RX 480 was Q2, well, very end of Q2. We'll just say summer 2016. And this was probably Team B. So you see the trend here? What's the thing that you guys, assuming this is somewhat accurate, Team B made this. Team B made this. Team A made this. Team A made this. So, what does that kind of indicate? Like, what are kind of the key takeaways? Assuming this logic is true, how would you analyze this if someone gave you that data? Like, what would you conclude from this? Assuming that the team that did the Polaris largely worked on RDNA 2 and maybe RDNA 1. Probably RDNA 1. But they also did RDNA 2. That roadmap. What can you conclude here? I would say this is what I would conclude. Okay, Nero's saying Team B should be RDNA 4. Yeah. Okay, okay, I can see that. I want to see what other people think. I'm curious to know what people's thoughts on this is. You heard RDNA 4 will be monolithic. Max is saying it's monolithic. Okay. Do you see why this logic is starting to make more sense? here's what I conclude. Looking at this from a purely business standpoint and a win or lose. This GPU, and this includes the 580, which was the rebrand from 2017 that went to crypto mining. This was a very successful GPU. This was a very successful GPU for AMD. In fact, our Polaris was so successful. Polaris was the most successful GCN-based GPU in RTG's entire history. It was very successful. The RX 480 and the RX 580 and the 470 and the 570 were very well received GPUs. They did very well. They were very price competitive. And there's still a lot of people that are using them today. If you look up Steam hardware survey, you're still going to see the RX 580 and the 570 and the 470 and the 480. They're still used a lot today. Likewise, RDNA 6000 was very successful. So what does that mean? It kind of means that either Team B, what does this say? What does this data imply? I don't want to conclude this yet. I want to hear what you guys think. Assuming this is true, what does this say? What can you conclude about Team B? Nero is saying the whole point is to get RDNA on full chiplets so you can start packaging and APUs. What does this imply about Team B? I want to know what you guys think about Team B. The B team. The one that did the Polaris and the RDNA 1 and 2. If they're making a 350 die for the mid-range all over again. And that would be Team B because Team B did 5700 XT. So I'm waiting for someone to say something about Team B. AMD should change its name to BMD. No. It makes me want to think, or almost say, that Team B is the one that launches the more successful GPUs. Like, Team B seems to be on the ball. Like, they're the ones that seem to either get lucky or they just straight up are better than Team A. Now, that's not true, but if someone was looking at this from a pure economics, business, and fundamental, like how many units did you actually sell, they'd probably say Team B is the better team. Looking at this, they'd probably say, yeah, Polaris was good, Vega was bad, RDNA 1 and 2 were good, RDNA 3 was meh. You know, like, that's probably what they're thinking. If they're like, oh, Team B made Polaris, I mean, that's really good. They did really good. They did RDNA 1 and RDNA 2. Man, that's even better. That's one of the most successful series ever. A lot of people still use 5700 XTs, guys. And for all intents and purposes, we're going to say Team B did RDNA 1 and RDNA 2. You just asked AI about RDNA 4, and it said that it will be a monolithic. I'm not asking about RDNA 4. Everybody seems to be wanting to talk about RDNA 4. We're going to get to RDNA 4. I'm asking you guys, what is your conclusion about Team B? The team, the engineers themselves, not the products. I'm talking about, like, if this is a given set of data, what do you conclude about Team B? Not RDNA 4, not Team A, and not the products that Team A made. Team B are the coffee drinkers. See, this is the sort of stuff that I want to hear. This is the sort of stuff that I want to hear. People are probably like, oh, Team B's better than Team A. Why is Team B Team B? They should be the A team. I'm waiting for someone to say that. Team B, regular GPU architecture. Team A for more experimental ones. Very good comment, Max. That is the best comment of the night. I was waiting for someone to say that. That is the highlight of this live stream. You just made my day. Team B works on the tried and true regular designs that you can rely on, that you can mass produce, and you don't have to worry. Whereas Team A is more experimental. Team A is like the abstract artist who's given all this time to brainstorm and think about the creative design and what they want to do. And let's do chiplets because it's cool. It's the future. Let's use HBM because it allows us to use 4096-bit memory buses and low power, and we don't have a problem with high idle power. Team A seems like that kind of team. You know what I'm saying? Like more experimental. They have the more experimental designs because Vega 64, HBM, all this, HBM this, HBM that, yeah. Okay, and then the chiplet stuff with Radeon 3, that was their next best thing. Like that was the next thing. Very good point. This is the best comment of the night for sure. Best comment. That is analyzing the data. That is truly analyzing the data. That shows that you understand. That's an A+ grade. If I was grading that homework assignment, you got a 110 because that shows that you fundamentally understand the difference between these GPUs. You know that Vega and XTX use a very different style, and you know that the 480 and the 6900 XT are monolithic, and they use traditional designs with traditional memory interfaces. So, yeah. So, okay, now we can move past that. So now we can start talking about the future, Radeon 4, Radeon 5. So, assuming that Team A was the ones who did the current generation. Why did I not see your comment? You put a comment above before about that. They're the GPU team that refines the GPU design of the older design to make a more stable and more tried and true GPU design. I see what you're saying with that comment, but that comment at least the way you wrote it, makes it seem like tried and true, yes, but refining the GPU design. It's not necessarily refining the GPU design, but I get what you're saying. But we're gonna also, for all intents and purposes, we're gonna say Team B did Radeon 1. So the 5700 XT, that's Team B. And also the 580, the 590, the rebrands, that's also Team B. We're gonna give that stuff to Team B. All the weird, like out in left field, non-standard things like R9 Fury, Vega, Radeon 7, the chiplet stuff with Radeon 3, that is Team A. So why am I saying Team A and Team B? Because we're assuming that Team A, being the A team, they're the forward thinkers. They're the industry veterans that are thinking, what is the future going to look like? What is the future of technology? How do we get the performance uplifts to justify a generational shift? That's what Team A does. They brainstorm way out there to try to think of like ways to solve technical problems with newer designs, with very like almost out of left field ideas, like interposer, HBM. Let's just stick HBM on an interposer. Instead of doing HBM on an interposer because HBM is expensive, we're gonna say that for data center. Let's do chiplet. Let's do MCMs. Let's do that. That's Team A. That's what Team A does. That's why they're the A team, because they're the ones who are innovating on the bleeding edge of technology. That's why they're Team A. People are looking at this and like, oh, Team B makes the better products. Well, Team B does tried and true. They're kind of the group that like makes it happen, and it's scalable, and it also is relatively problem-free, reliable, like it's not experimental. So, do we have anything on the market for RDNA 3 Plus at the moment? I think we have them in mobile. Yeah, the Strix and those things, but they're coming like later this year. Yes, RDNA 1 and 2 were Team B. RDNA 4 and 6 will be Team B. Then something like that. Team A will experiment with RDNA 6. Well, what this means is that Team B is almost done with their product. Okay, well, hold on. Let's not say almost. Let's try to figure this out. Okay. So, look at the time span that they had. Team B from 2016, they were given what? 4 years. 4 years. 4 years to develop a product. Team A, they had about 5-ish, a little more than 5 years, like almost 5.5 years between product launches. So, do you see now why there is a very, very high chance that there's 2 different teams at AMD that develop GPUs? Do you guys understand my train of thought? Because think about it. Like if someone asked you, make me a GPU. Make me a GPU that competes with Nvidia. What are you going to tell them? Okay, I'm going to need engineers. And you're going to need to, and you're going to have to define how long it's going to take you to make that GPU. Because it's not going to happen tomorrow. I'm not going to make a GPU in 5 months. I can tell you that right now. See what I'm saying? So you have to have alternate teams to develop these products. And within those teams, you have subgroups within those teams. So you might have Team A_1 and Team A_2 working on, but see, this starts talking about like, oh, one part works on power delivery, another one works on shaders, another one works on memory interface. So that's getting into the weeds of how the product development actually happens. But at a very high level, you can think of it like, okay, there's a Team A and there's a Team B. Team A is more forward-thinking. They're kind of out of the box. They think of like newer ideas, maybe, or you can think of it like that. And Team B makes more of like, they follow industry standard. They're kind of the fallback. Like if this product fails miserably, Team B basically picks up the slack and fixes it. But they work in alternate cycles in terms of when they deliver to market. That way you maintain the illusion of a 2-year life cycle for products, when in reality you have one team working on this and you have another team working on that, and then you have the first team working on that, etc. So that's usually how product development works. And that isn't to say there's a Team C. There could also be a Team C, but we're not going to do that because that's going to make it even more complicated to talk about, but you guys get the idea. So the only thing, RDNA 3, yeah. So let's talk about RDNA 4. So what do you guys think RDNA 4 is going to do, and how is it going to be different from RDNA 3? Do you think RDNA 4 is going to be monolithic? We already had people. So here's the thing, guys. If we assume the trend of alternating between Team A and Team B, this means Team B is up to bat this time. So which means RDNA 4 is probably a Team B product. So if I were a betting man, I would say RDNA 4 is monolithic, without knowing anything, without looking at leaks, without looking at AI, asking AI, like someone asked the AI earlier, I know they said that it told them monolithic, but looking at the trend, assuming this is the data, monolithic is probably what RDNA 4 is going to be. And it's a Team B product, and it's probably going to be something similar to the RX, similar to RX 480 or 5700 XT. Similar to these products. There. Meaning it's going to be potentially successful. It's potentially going to be more successful than RDNA 3, its previous generation. Why? Because if you look at Team B's track record, they tend to launch the more successful products. The RX 480 and the RX 580 were very successful. In fact, there's so many people still using them today. The RX 5700 and the 5700 XT were also very successful GPUs. They were price competitive. They outperformed their Nvidia peers at that price point, at that performance tier when they came out. Again, Team B. And we already know how good RDNA 2 was for a multitude of reasons. That was Team B. And I also said that RDNA 4 is 128. Very interesting. It'll be a mono GPU die with double the RT performance of the 7900 XTX with the raster performance of the 70. And we already know, Matt, we've had this discussion that is probably going to be a relatively successful product when it launches, if that is the case. So what I'm saying, the key takeaway from this discussion is that typically when it's a Team B product, it tends to be a more successful product. The public seems to perceive it more positively. The reviewers tend to think of it more highly. Like I feel like I would say that the reviewers in general, they hold RDNA 2 in high regard. They also reviewed the RX 580 and 480 as relatively good GPUs, offering better value than their Nvidia counterparts. The 480 was an 8 gigabyte versus the 1060, which was a 6 or a 3. I mean, the 480 also had a 4 gigabyte variant. But you guys get what I'm saying. Like, AMD was literally offering better, more hardware for the money. More hardware for less money. That's how they were doing it. And they did the same thing with the RDNA 2. You were getting 16 gigabyte RX 6800 or 6800 XT versus Nvidia stuff, which had nowhere near as much VRAM at those price points. So when it comes to Team B seems to be like, everyone's probably like, oh man, Team B needs to be called Team A. They're the A team. They're the ones that have all the successful stuff. Well, call it luck. Call it like better product planning. Someone said earlier product planning was a weakness. Well, not really. Not really. When you analyze it at this level and you do a deep dive on the products, you can see that AMD still has a path to victory. Although it is a very, very long road, they could do it. AMD is still relevant. They can still be relevant in the GPU space. It just takes time. It just takes time. They have to make some, like Lisa Su said, they have to make some big bets on the future, and they have to hope they're right. Now, what I will say is that Team A seems to be the team that is tasked with making those big bets. They're the ones that bet on HBM. What happened? It was really good, but it was very expensive, and it was not scalable, and it was not necessarily competitive due to architectural limitations at the time. Fast forward to RDNA 3. They applied chiplets to the GPU. Was it good? Some say yes. Some say it was mixed results. Others say it was not worth it. So again, they make these decisions a long time in advance. So now let's get back to the final topic of this discussion. Let's close out this topic. Look at this. 4 years. 4 years. So let's think about this. Team B has been working on a product for 4 years. So let that sink in. Let that sink in. RDNA 4 has been in development since 2020. Newsflash. Newsflash. RDNA 4 has been in development since 2020. 4 years. Like I said earlier, GPUs have a 4 to 5 year development cycle. So think about that, guys. What does that mean? That means if you bet on chiplets, you made that bet a long time ago. 4 to 5 years ago. So when Team A was tasked with making RDNA 3, they made that decision starting in 2017 to explore the idea of chiplets. And that's because at the time, that was the year that Ryzen 1st Gen came out. So that means the public had no idea about chiplets. Like, no one knew what chiplets were in 2017. But AMD, secretly in the labs, they were already making the decision to bring this new radical design to the market as a disaggregated GPU architecture. At the time, they didn't call it chiplet because nobody knew what... Chiplet was a term that came out in the mainstream, in the media, in 2019. I don't think AMD originated that term. I think it came from somebody else. It came out from the public. But so whatever they called it internally, disaggregated design, multi-chip design. This makes me think of the roadmap. The old AMD roadmap that Raja Koduri showed off years ago. Where is it? AMD roadmap, Polaris, Vega, Navi. Where is that picture? Yeah. Okay, I'm going to show it to you guys. So, you guys remember this? Does anybody remember this? Does this look familiar? Look at this. 28 nanometer, Polaris, Vega, Navi. Now, look at this. This was a slide from, when was this article? March 14th, 2016. This was a slide from 2016. This predates first gen Ryzen. So, look at this. Check this out. This is a very interesting slide to go back. And this is why I like to use the past. I like to use history because I feel like it's so interesting to look at to go back and look at how things played out, and then knowing what you knew years ago and not being able to predict the future, but now being able to go back and look. Now, look at this. This is 2016. This was a 2016 slide deck from Raja Koduri's presentation on their GPU roadmap. So Polaris, 2.5x perf per watt. Now, keep in mind, Polaris, Team B. Vega, HBM2, forward thinking, new stuff, Team A. They predicted 2017. It did come out in 2017. Remember, this is from 2016. Now, look at what they have for Navi. Here's where things get really interesting. So look at what they have. Navi is floating over 2018. And all it says is, there's two words here. Scalability and next-gen memory. Next-gen memory, I mean, that can mean a lot of things. That could mean GDDR6, GDDR7. It could be any newer memory standard. That's an easy one to understand. But I want you to pay attention to this word, scalability. Scalability. What does that mean? That means that the GPU is expected to be scalable on multiple levels. Almost like you could better cut it down. So at the time, if someone looks at this and they read that word scalability, they're like, okay, that just means that they're probably going to market segment the GPU. They're going to cut the die up more or whatever. But actually, that was kind of a hidden message there. That was the idea that they were possibly considering scalable architectures, meaning multi-chip modules, aka chiplet designs. See? So that's what that is. So Navi could be a scalable architecture that could be used long term. So that's the key takeaway. So that kind of says, okay, that means that chiplets were a thing that they were already playing around with way back in 2016. So this kind of proves my point, talking about the RDNA 4 has been in development since 2020, because the chiplet stuff had been in design since 2017, or maybe even older, like 2016. So, and that was first to market with RDNA 3. So you guys can tell that the big bets were made a long time ago. So whatever RDNA 4 is, whatever it ends up being, they've already been working on this thing for 4 years. So whatever it is, it's probably going to be a pretty successful product. And let's go ahead and close out this. RDNA 5 has been in development since 2022. So keep that in mind. So you add 4 years to that. That would mean that RDNA 5 is the next generation, forward-thinking, experimental thing that could potentially fix all of the weaknesses of Radeon. That's probably going to be 2026, based off of all of the analysis, the technical analysis that we've done here. And I feel like RDNA 5 is most likely going to have dedicated Tensor Core hardware, dedicated RT hardware, unless RDNA 4 already introduces that. But if it doesn't, then RDNA 5 definitely will, because that is going to be the Team A design. So, all right, those are my thoughts on Radeon's potential roadmap. What do you guys think? Chips and cheeses, 64 shaders with da-da-da-da. Okay. Yeah, so he was saying that from Chips and Cheese. But anyway, that's kind of the takeaway from looking at the past to understand the future. So, well, a lot of people are like, oh, well, AMD has to, like, counter Nvidia. No, actually, they don't. If you think about it, if you're a GPU, if someone told you to make a GPU, if someone literally told you to make a GPU, what are you going to do? In general, you're going to be aware of what your competition is doing and what they're capable of. But at the same time, you have your own design goals, you have your own objectives, and you're pretty much going to compare your product not to your competitor. You're going to compare your product to your previous generation product. So that's what you're going to test it against, primarily. And you will also test it with your competitor, but you're going to test it with your against your competitor at the beginning and at the end, because you want to figure out, like, you know, like what is the proper comparison at the time that you compare against the competitor. So, and you don't always have a good control over when your competitor launches stuff. So you don't really do direct comparisons with the competitor. You do them later on, after the fact. So you're going to compare with your previous generation. And that's how AMD does it. That's how Nvidia does it. And have you ever seen Nvidia show a slide that compares their GPUs to AMD's GPUs? When was the last time you saw Nvidia show a presentation that had an AMD GPU on it. Oh, that's right. They don't do it. See? So they compare to themselves. And that's why AMD largely does the same. Like, they're going to compare RDNA 4 to RDNA 3 to RDNA 2. Sometimes they like to do... This is the reason why I feel like... comparisons between the Team B to previous Team B and Team A to previous Team A are like the very interesting comparisons. But I don't know, you know, going forward, I feel like I'm going to use this information for whenever RDNA 4 comes out and Nvidia stuff. When I do my comparisons, I'm going to make it a goal of mine to benchmark and compare to not just the previous generation, but to the previous generation. Because most likely the teams that work on products are alternating like this. We know for a fact that Intel does this with CPUs. I don't know for a fact if AMD does this with GPUs, but I wouldn't be surprised because it makes a lot of sense. It makes sense to give an engineering team a 4-year, 5-year window to make a GPU, and that's how it works. And then you have another team work on like another one for 4 or 5 years, and they're alternating within each other, so you always have product every 2 years. That makes a lot of sense. It's no different with Intel. Intel tasked Roger Kodori. So you guys do I need to further prove this? Let me do one more thing to prove this point. Let's talk about Intel's Arc. So Arc A770 started development in... Okay, guys, here's the question. This is the final question of the stream, and then we're going to close the stream. Or we're going to end the stream. When did Arc A770 start development? Like, start serious development. Not like, oh, hey guys, I think we should make a GPU. No. When did they actually start working on this? Like, for real. They actually started putting the funding down, setting up the vertical business unit, assigning the vice presidents, setting up the directors and the managers and the engineers. When did this start? When did it start, guys? Let's see. The answers are on the board. All you got to do is use the Team A, Team B stuff to figure it out. (2015). Hey, just a guy. What's your reasoning for 2015? Like, why 2015? I mean, you don't have to explain it, but I'd like to get some context on why that year, specifically that year. Is there anybody else? Any other takers? Wait, what is Marcel saying? Why do we only see leaks when the architecture is nearly launching? It's like people zip their mouths. 2017? So now you're changing your answer? 2017? So the question is, okay, let me, yeah, I'm looking for a year. Well, should I reword this? I don't know if I should reword it. Okay, when did they seriously, RDNA seriously started development in what year? Seriously. Nero is thinking on the right lines. Nero's thinking on the right lines. Nero is using problem-solving skills to get the answer. You're thinking along the correct line. That's the correct train of thought, bringing up that name, Nero. Marcelo got it. The correct answer is 2018. 2018. ARC A770 Alchemist started serious development efforts in 2018. Raja Koduri joined Intel at the beginning of, you guessed it, 2018. Raja went to Intel at the beginning of 2018. He went on sabbatical after Vega was a big flop at the end of 2017. He was out of AMD at the end of 2017. He took a couple months off. Intel hired him into the start of 2018. And they're like, hey, come work for us. Let's change the world. And let's do something cool. Let's build a GPU. Okay, let's do it. I'm going to need this much money. I'm going to need these many engineers. He basically laid out the plan. Let's go. Let's do it. And guess what? 18, 19, 20, 21, 22. 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 to 5 years to make a GPU. And there's your answer. And that is the message that we are going to end the stream on. So now you guys know it takes about half a decade to make a GPU. Look at this one. Okay, you know what's interesting? RDNA 3. RDNA 3, the first chiplet GPU, started design work in 2017. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. RDNA 3 was being developed during that time. So 4 to 5 years. This is why I tell you guys, 4 to 5 years. Raja was Team A at AMD. HDX, you are right on the money. You are correct. You are correct. Raja Koduri was Team A. And I am willing to wager that David Wang is Team B. But I don't know that for a fact. I'm just saying, like, you look at when they get up on stage and when they were talking about stuff. Now, Raja did present RX 480, but that's because he was the head of RTG. So he was kind of spearheading a lot of those projects that Team A was working on. And then the backup, I mean, obviously he had input on what Team B was working on because, you know, he was the head. He was the top, so he technically directed both teams, but he was more involved with the Vega stuff, the HBM. He probably had some input on the chiplet stuff too before he left, but I don't know to what extent he was involved in that. Because when he went to Intel, he did monolithic. So I don't know, it's hard to say how much he was involved with RDNA 3, but it's safe to say that he was largely removed from most of RDNA 3 because he literally left the company in the first year of RDNA 3's development. So I don't think he had much to do with RDNA 3 and the chiplet design. But he probably was like on board with that. And we're in some of the discussions around kind of the Hail Mary, like we're going to do like disaggregated design for our next GPU. And he was like, okay, I mean, that sounds, because I mean, that to me, that's a huge gamble. So they were working on that when you were buying RX 480s were 2016. Just FYI. So they were not working on RDNA 3 in 2016. It was a 2017. Do you know what they were working on when you bought the 480? If you bought it in 2016, Team A was working on Vega. They were working on Vega and the hypothetical Radeon 7 at the time, which actually turned into a real product. That's what they were working on in 2016. They were finishing that up. But see, that was the thing. Like, it's interesting hindsight's 2020, but the thing is, you get an idea of like, it really makes you think about how these chip designers and engineers, how they have to keep their mouth shut about what they're working on when the product is still like a year out or more. Yeah, the team B is the one that did like 480, 580, RDNA 2, 6900 XT. Yeah, most likely that's how it works. They stagger them so you get products every 2 years. But the development cycle is so long that you got to have two separate teams. And if you think about it, way back, like back in the days of GCN, AMD was so cash starved that they didn't really have very clearly defined alternate teams because they were such a small company because they were bleeding so much money and they're supposed to go bankrupt in 2019. But we already talked about that in a previous live stream. So anyway, guys, that's going to be it for this live stream. I wanted to do something that was more interesting, I feel, different from talking about like CPU motherboards and stuff. We will talk about the motherboards for Zen 5 later on. My schedule for this month is going to be mostly like gaming focused for the most part for me, and then July is going to be hardware. It's going to be very heavy on hardware. So we have a couple things. Next week is Shadow of the Erd Tree, Elden Ring DLC. I will be playing that. I may do one live stream showcasing some of that, maybe two. Who knows? PAX Day is going to be in early access. I'm not super into that game from what I've seen, but people have been telling me, "Are you going to cover PAX Day? Early access is on the 18th. It's free to play." Maybe I'll check it out. I mean, it's free. I don't know. Whatever. We'll see. I mean, at the very least, I'll look and see how it runs. But we'll see. So PAX Day is coming out on the 18th. We got Shadow of the Erd Tree on I think the 21st. And then we have Final Fantasy XIV Dawn Trail Early Access on the 28th of June. So expect to see me randomly live streaming on the weekend for Final Fantasy XIV. Some of those are gonna be like super long live streams, especially the early access days, because I'm gonna be grinding like 10 levels in one play session, or at least try to get Viper and Pictomancer up to level 90. And then experience the actual expansion content. So that's gonna take like 2 days, I think, of actual grinding levels. So that is gonna be the 28th, the 29th. That's basically that weekend, the last weekend in June, and then that whole first week of July, for me personally, is just gonna be Final Fantasy XIV Dawn Trail. It's just gonna be Dawn Trail, more Dawn Trail, and more Dawn Trail. So if you want to stop by, I'll probably do some streams of me playing Dawn Trail. If you guys want to stop by, if you guys actually play the game, I guess I should have said this when I was streaming the game. If you guys play Final Fantasy XIV, if you're on the Aether data center, in fact, I think you can actually cross data centers. You can play with other players that are on different data centers now because they have cross-world transfer, which is like free. You just teleport in and you just log out. But if you guys want to play with me, like in the game, I'm open to that. So if you guys want to do group content, like I'm scouting out other players that want to group up with me and dungeon spam in like a 6 to 8 hour marathon and just grind 10 levels in a single 6 to 8 hour play session. Now that sounds very hardcore, but I'm currently looking for 3 other players to team up with me, like basically form a group and just run a dungeon until we level up, then rinse and repeat over and over and over again, level 80 to 81 to 82 to 83, all the way to level 90. So I'm scouting out players in Final Fantasy XIV. So if you play on the Aether data center, and you want to be on stream, and if you want to join the Discord, I can join the voice Discord, but then you're probably going to be heard on YouTube, just FYI, and maybe Twitch if I dual stream some of these play sessions. But the way I see it, the first week of July and the very last weekend in June, there's going to be a lot of marathon, long-form live streams from me where I'm grinding levels in Final Fantasy XIV. So expect to see a lot of Final Fantasy XIV on this channel. I know my primary audience is less into gaming and more into PC hardware. But that doesn't mean, like, let's be honest, grinding levels in an MMO is very, very boring. So I can be talking with the chat the whole time about tech-related stuff. I mean, it's not a big deal. So, but don't expect me to open up, like, Paint and draw timelines and roadmaps because I'm going to be stuck grinding levels. So that's the caveat of that. But yeah, if you want to stop by during those live streams, feel free to do it. We can discuss anything, hardware recommendations, case builds, coolers, etc., all that stuff. So the hardware is for gaming. Yeah, Kelly, exactly. The hardware is for gaming. Exactly. Oh, HTZ, you're getting Dawntrail? Okay, that's cool. Yeah, I mean, so if you're gonna be playing on Ether, we can team up. We can group up. So I'll let you guys know I have 2 characters. I play on 2 different characters on the Ether data center. One is my I call that character like my melee DPS / tank / some of the healers. So I guess this is very off topic, but let's go ahead and clean some of this up. Just because I am trying to scout out potential people to group up with and do some of this content here. So what I will say is I have 2 characters and I want to level both of them. But for playing through the expansion, I'm going to play on 1 character. I have to choose 1 character because I can already tell I'm predicting the queue times to get into the server to log in is going to be pretty bad at launch, or at least that's how it was last expansion. So I got 2 characters. Main character has the following jobs. So I have Gunbreaker. I have Gunbreaker, Warrior, so those are my tanks. Then I have Monk. What's the other one? Machinist. Those are my DPS. And then I have, for the healer on this character, I have Scholar and Sage. So this is this character. And then technically Summoner, but I don't actually have the proper gear. And then on my alt character has the other tanks. So Dark Knight and Paladin. And then for the melee DPS, do I even have anything? On this character, I don't. I have Dancer and Bard. And then for the, actually, I have Black Mage also, which Black Mage is like my favorite caster. I think these are the level 90s. Yeah, these are the max level. And then for the healer, I have White Mage. Well, White Mage will be at 90 come expansion. I'm currently like level 88 or 89. And then Astrologian. So these are the jobs. These are the different classes that I have on my 2 characters. So I cover most of them. Like, some of my jobs are at like 80, but I'm not gonna have enough time to level those up. So you just started, so you can create a new character on Ether. Yeah, if you want to group up with me, it's better to be on the same data center. So if you want to be on the same server as me, Adamantoise. I play natively on the Adamantoise server, the Adamantoise realm, which is basically the Adamantoise server. This one is if you want to be on the exact same server as me, if they allow you to create characters. This is one of the original servers from when the game launched in 2013. So I don't know if this server still accepts new characters. But if you want to play on this exact same server as me, then you want to go on Adamantoise. Otherwise, as long as you're in the Aether data center, you should be fine in terms of grouping up with me in multiplayer content. So this gives people an idea of what I'm actually playing. Realistically, I'll highlight the ones that I'm actually playing. So I really play these two tanks. I don't really play Warrior. I don't really play Paladin, but I have the max level. I prefer Gunbreaker and Dark Knight. And then I really like Monk and Machinist. And then on here, I really like Black Mage. I don't really care for Dancer and Bard, but I do have them at max level. And then for the healers, I primarily play Scholar. I feel like it's easy mode versus Sage. Sage is big brain healing. You know, like if you want to go hardcore, Sage is the way to go. And then otherwise, Scholar is much, much easier. And then on the other character, I currently have been playing Astrologian. It's a much busier job. So Astrologian's the big brain healer on this character, and Sage is the big brain healer on the other character. Scholar is easy mode, and White Mage is very easy mode for a healer. So anyway, this is what I've been playing. Those are the classes or jobs that I play in the game currently. But here's the thing. Here is the trick. Or I guess, here's why I'm trying to recruit 3 other players. Because when the expansion comes out, my main character is going to be playing as a Viper. The new job, the new melee job is the Viper. So I'm going to be playing Viper. I'm going to be going through the story mode on Viper, on my main character. And then on my alt character, we're going to skip almost all the cutscenes so we can like speed run it the second time over. But the alt character is going to be the Pictomancer, which is the new caster DPS. So that way I get to experience both jobs and level both of them to max level throughout the expansion. So that's my plan. That's kind of my plan, my action plan for how I'm going to tackle Dawn Trail. I'm still trying to flesh out how I'm going to power level those two to 90. And then it'll just go through the story from there. But we're most likely going to be playing on this character for most of the live streams. So just keep that in mind. So you'll see me play as Gunbreaker, Monk, Scholar, and Viper. How do you change E3? You can't move the character. Since you're new, just create a new one. Just create a new character on E3. It's the easiest way. That's what I would do. But anyway, that's what's planning. That's what the plan is for the future. So anyway, guys, that's going to be it for this stream. After all the Final Fantasy stuff is done, then we will probably start doing a lot of videos on motherboards for Zen 5, like X870E and X870. So until then, I'll catch you guys next time on Tech Thursdays. Until then, take care, and I'll see you next week. Thanks.